Chapter 777. The heat on Dragon Mother's body was fading at an amazing speed. At the same time, the pitch-black scales outside her body gradually turned into white crystals, emitting a white mist. The transformation happened very fast. From her chest, as the center, the mist spread to every corner of her body. Within a blink of an eye, even the enormous dragon wings on her back had turned into a pair of crystal wings that looked like two ice sculptures. Ice crystal? Dean was shocked. It looked like his frozen right arm. Did Dragon Mother also have ice blood disease? Moreover, she seemed to be able to control her body to transform into ice crystals. The stooped old man roared angrily when he saw Dragon Mother's transformation. He suddenly raised his speed, trying to interrupt her transformation. However, Dragon Mother's body had been mostly crystallized by now, and the heat inside her had dropped to the freezing point. She looked like a dying person. She let out a sonorous phoenix cry and lunged at the old man. Her demonized ice crystal dragon claw tore out forcefully, even leaving cracks in the air. White mist coiled around her body as the dragon claw struck on the old man's sharp claw. In the next moment, the old man retracted his claw as fast as a bolt of lightning. His claw was wrapped in a frosty mist, showing signs of being frozen. The stooped old man's face darkened. He immediately retreated. Dragon Mother took advantage of the victory and chased after him. She forced the old man to retreat step by step. The old man didn't dare to fight back, so he could only hide. Dean's eyelids twitched. He didn't expect that the situation would be reversed in an instant. Dragon Mother's power could even force a dominator to retreat. During the chase, the area of Dragon Mother's body grew larger and larger. Soon, her entire body was covered in ice, making her look like a goddess of war carved from ice and snow. Meanwhile, the heat released from her body had completely disappeared. Even when she launched fierce attacks, she didn't release any heat at all. Dean watched the two of them chase as fast as lightning. Their roles were switched in the blink of an eye. He was surprised. Was there such a hidden power in the ice blood disease? How did she control it? After his right arm was crystallized, no matter how hard he tried to control it, his right arm was always crystallized and couldn't return to normal human skin. However, during the meeting, he didn't see any sign of ice blood disease on Dragon Mother's body, which made him doubt that Dragon Mother didn't have ice blood disease. However, her crystallized body was so real, exactly like his right arm. However, she didn't show this power until now. There should be a big sequela, Dean thought. At this moment, Dragon Mother's combat power was slightly higher than the Dominator. She was one of the stronger ones among the Dominators. Her power was completely above the other two hunter families. The Rock Demon, as the strongest of the Rock family, had died in battle, which meant that he didn't have the same power as Dragon Mother. On the other side, the strongest of the Wing family was the same. They only had the power of the inner wilderness, but they weren't the top of the inner wilderness. Dragon Mother was on another level. If she could control this power freely, the Rock Tribe and the Wing Tribe would never have existed. This could only mean that this power would bring great sequela to her, and she couldn't use it at any time. She might have to pay a big price after using it once. It would save me a lot of trouble if she could directly kill these invaders. After she killed them, she would also fall into a period of weakness. Then the rest of the people. Thinking of the rest of the people, Dean couldn't help but look at the battlefield where Eureka and the others were fighting. He saw Eureka leading the pioneers to besiege Fatty and the other two invaders. The graceful woman was the most seriously injured. Her chest was stabbed, and there was a blood stain. Fatty, who had been unscathed all this while, was now covered in wounds. There were several purple and black patches on his skin, as if he had been poisoned. His movements were no longer as agile as before, and he had no time to take care of the graceful woman. The strongest of the Wing family, Eureka, and the two military masters. There are 4 inner wilderness powerhouses, and the rest of the pioneers and outer wilderness powerhouses. There are 17, 18 people. Du Jian's eyes swept around, observing the situation on the battlefield. If Dragon Mother could kill the invaders, then it would be the weakest period of the inner wall. If Dragon Mother recovered, he would have almost no hope to occupy the inner wall. After all, the hidden power of Dragon Mother had really scared him, and it was far beyond his expectation. Therefore, he had to take action when the battle was over. He couldn't give them time to recover. However, from the current situation, even with Aisha's help, it would be difficult to deal with so many pioneers. Dean didn't care about those ordinary pioneers. Even if there were twice as many ordinary pioneers, he wouldn't put them in his eyes. No one could withstand his sharp attack, and they would die in a single touch. But the 4 inner wilderness powerhouses were a bit tricky. With Aisha's strength, she could only contain one of them. Moreover, these people were not stupid. Once they fought, they would be aware of Aisha's special situation. They could let one of them delay Aisha, and the other 3 could kill Dudian. Although Aisha's current strength belonged to the top level of the inner wilderness, but she lost in awareness. It was very difficult to deal with an inner wilderness level powerhouse in a short period of time. Dean didn't want to let Aisha take action as much as possible. In the current situation, there were only 4 inner wilderness level powerhouses left. It was meaningless to let Aisha deal with one of them. With his current strength, it was too difficult to deal with the masters of the inner wall. It was almost impossible. But once he missed this opportunity, it would be even more difficult to let Dragon Mother recover. Moreover, he didn't know when the Wall Lord, who was at the level of Abyss Walker, would return. Once he appeared, Dudian could only slip away to live in the wilderness outside the giant wall. He didn't dare to step half a step near the giant wall. Therefore, there was only one opportunity in front of him. Dudian was thinking while paying attention to the movements on both sides of the battlefield. The hunchbacked old man was being chased by Dragon Mother. His body was torn by Dragon Mother's claws. Some parts of his body were frostbitten, and his blood vessels were sealed. The defeat was almost irreversible. Dudian saw that the old man didn't make any move. He knew that the old man didn't have any cards up his sleeves. This meant that Dragon Mother would win. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He no longer hesitated as he rushed into the battlefield. He used the demonic body and turned into a terrifying monster with sharp blades all over his body. He rushed towards the battlefield where Eureka was. Eureka noticed the amazing aura coming from behind. She turned her head and recognized that the monster was Dudian. There was a trace of surprise in her eyes. She recognized Dudian's demonic body. The National Master also had such a demonic body. She didn't expect that Dudian, a resident of the Outer Wall, could get the magic marks of the legendary monster Splitter. Moreover, there seemed to be some differences between Dudian's demonic body and the National Master's, but she couldn't tell what the differences were. It seemed that the number of sharp blades on his body was more, and the luster of each part of the shell was slightly different. "Where's Haisha?" Eureka withdrew from the battle and retreated to the outer edge. She anxiously asked Dudian, who was approaching at high speed. Dean rushed to her and stopped, saying, "She'll be here soon. I'll support her first." Not good. His pupils suddenly shrank as he looked at the front of Eureka in horror. Eureka's heart skipped a beat. She quickly turned around and saw that the battle in the encirclement was still going on. The 3 invaders had not broken free from the encirclement of the outstanding pioneers. Suddenly, an ominous feeling rose in her heart. Before she could turn around, a murderous aura suddenly burst out from behind her. Eureka turned her head in horror. She saw Dudian's fair and handsome cheeks were full of dense killing intent. The sharp blades on his body were attacking her head, chest, and other fatal parts. Puff! A cutting sound rang out. Blood sputtered. Eureka's body flew upside down. After flying a few rounds in the air, she landed on one foot. Her body crawled on the ground like a civet. Her eyes were red as she stared at Dudian angrily. There was a scratch on her neck. It was shallow, but it had already cut her carotid artery. There were also a few bloody holes on her chest, arms, shoulders, and other places, but there were no fatal injuries. She raised her hand to cover the carotid artery, pressing down the flowing blood. She gritted her teeth, and her eyes were full of hatred. How could she not understand that Dudian had betrayed them? At this critical moment, he actually attacked her and helped the invaders. This kind of betrayal made her particularly angry. She couldn't wait to tear Dudian into pieces with her eyes. Dudian's heart sank when he saw that she had escaped the fatal attack. He secretly regretted it. At the same time, he also felt a trace of fear. He had seen Eureka's quick reaction before, but he didn't expect her nerve reaction speed to be so fast. In such a short moment, she could actually escape his sneak attack at such a close distance. It was simply terrifying. If it was a head-on fight, even if he was full of sharp weapons, it was estimated that it would be difficult to hurt her even a little bit. He didn't continue to chase Eureka. Instead, he immediately changed his direction and rushed to the encirclement of the three invaders. The surrounding pioneers were focused on attacking the three invaders. When they saw Dudian coming over, they didn't think much. However, when Dudian approached them, they immediately attacked. In the blink of an eye, several pioneers were caught off guard and were injured by the sneak attack. 2 of them were beheaded on the spot and died. When Fatty saw Dudian, he thought that Dudian had come to help these people to encircle and annihilate them. His eyes showed anger. However, the next moment, when he saw Dudian's attack, he was stunned for a moment. He quickly reacted and immediately moved closer to Dudian. Inform your boss to retreat immediately. I've left a trap under the wall of size leading to the outer wall. It can help you cover your retreat. Dudian joined the encirclement of the 3 people and repelled the surrounding pioneers. At the same time, he whispered quickly, "Leave immediately." That dragon mother has used a special method to enhance her strength, but it should only be maintained for a very short time. After this period, it won't be too late to kill back. Hearing Dudian's words, Fatty raised his head and glanced at the distance. When he saw Dragon Mother's whole body had turned into ice, his face changed. "Gather my territory. I'll go first. You guys hurry up." Dudian didn't wait for his reply. He killed his way out of the encirclement and fled all the way to the distance. Seeing Dudian escape, Eureka gritted her teeth and shouted to the pioneers who were chasing Dudian, "Don't worry about him. Kill them first." The pioneers heard her words and stopped immediately. They turned back to continue to encircle Fatty and the others. Eureka also joined the battle. She was angry and annoyed. The reason why she didn't send people to chase Dudian was that Aisha was behind him. Moreover, Dudian's strength was not inferior to the god of war at the peak of the outer wasteland. If they wanted to chase Dudian, they would have to send at least 2 inner wasteland-level powerhouses. Otherwise, they would die. Once they sent people to chase Dudian, it would be easy for the 3 invaders to escape. She was worried that Dudian deliberately lured her to chase him and contain their strength so that the invaders could escape. In a blink of an eye, Dudian rushed out 7 or 8 miles away. He jumped onto a roof and stopped. Seeing that no one was chasing him, he was relieved. Then he looked at the battle in front of him. He believed that the invaders should have a way to break out of the encirclement. Once they caught up with him, he could act according to his plan. A few minutes later, as Dudian expected, Fatty passed the news to the stooped old man. The stooped old man pinned down Dragon Mother. Fatty suddenly broke out and tore a gap in the encirclement. He took the other 2 people to kill them. However, halfway through the fight, Eureka and the others saw through their intentions and attacked with all their might. The graceful woman was killed on the spot, her head separated from her body. Fatty was sad and angry. He didn't irrationally take revenge for the graceful woman. Instead, he took the other person to kill them out of the encirclement and fled in the direction of Dudian. Dudian immediately turned around and ran. He couldn't wait for them to catch up, especially the stooped old man. Once he brought Dragon Mother, no matter who it was, they could easily catch up with him and kill him. Dudian used the magic wings and rushed forward. In the blink of an eye, he rushed out of King's City and flew into the wilderness. After flying at full speed for more than an hour, Dudian arrived at the Sighing Wall. At this moment, there were 7 or 8 frontiersmen patrolling the Sighing Wall. They immediately issued a warning when they saw Dudian flying over. Dudian landed and quickly killed all the guards on the wall. He took out a signal tube that was commonly used by hunters outside the giant wall. He held it in his hand. He was a little nervous as he waited quietly. After a moment, several shadows appeared in the distant sky and rapidly approached. They were the intruders led by the stooped old man. However, there were only 3 of them. The 5th brother who was fighting with the Wing family powerhouse was gone. There were only the stooped old man, the burly man, and Fatty. All 3 of them had injuries and the smell of blood on their bodies. They were quite embarrassed. Dujian's eyes flashed. When they got close, he shouted, "Are there any pursuers?" The stooped old man panted slightly. His eyes were deep. He looked at Dudian and said in a low voice, "They're not far behind. Has the person who fought with you caught up?" Dudian continued to ask. "No." The stooped old man's answer was very brief. Dean looked behind them. At the end of the horizon in the wasteland, he could vaguely see some black spots approaching. He looked up and said to the 3 people who were flying over, "Go to my territory first, heal your wounds, and then come back." The stooped old man did not speak. He nodded and flew over the sighing wall. Dudian flew behind them. After flying for thousands of meters, he opened the signal tube in his hand, and a red smoke bomb rushed into the sky. The stooped old man turned his head. His eyes flashed with murderous intent. He said coldly, "What is this?" "Signal flare." Dudian seemed to say without hesitation, "I said, I will cover them. They're catching up. My people will delay them when they pass through here. They should be able to stop some of them. As for the rest, you should be able to easily deal with them with your strength. They won't dare to chase too deep." The Dragon Mother did not catch up, but the others did. Dudian estimated that Yulida and the others were very anxious at this moment. In their eyes, this was the only chance to kill the intruders and take back the god's corpse, but it was ruined by him. The stooped old man stared at Dudian. He did not say much. He adjusted his breathing and tried to recover as much as possible while rushing on. Just when they were about to reach Mount Utopia, an earth-shaking roar came from afar. It was as if a mountain had fallen from the sky and smashed on the ground. The rumbling sound caused the ground to shake, and the aftermath spread dozens of miles away. Chapter 778. The hunchbacked old man's heart skipped a beat when he heard the loud explosion. He turned around and saw a huge cloud of dust rising from the wall of size. The cloud of dust rose several hundred meters high in the blink of an eye, and could be seen even from dozens of miles away. The 3 of them didn't expect Dean to set such a dangerous trap. Fortunately, he didn't use it against them. There was a trace of coldness in their eyes as they looked at Dean. He mercilessly attacked the people inside the wall and helped them. It could be seen that this person was not an ordinary person. In the blink of an eye, Dean, the old man, and others flew over Utopo Mountain. Dean took the lead to land. He glanced around but didn't see Noyce and others. He was relieved as he quietly walked into the temple. The attendants of light who were stationed outside the temple saluted respectfully as they saw Dean. They looked towards the direction of the sighing wall after Dean entered the temple. They could faintly hear the huge explosion. It was hard to imagine what had happened. Stooped old man and others followed Dean into the temple. Stooped old man's heart was relieved. He knew that the master of the devil family didn't chase them. There were only some ordinary pioneers and masters of the inner wilderness. The strength of the trap left by Dean was enough to make them suffer. Even if they caught up, he could deal with it. He immediately found a chair and sat down after entering the temple. He took out the healing medicines from his backpack and didn't talk to Dean. The burly man and Fatty looked at Dean. They wanted to say something, but they held back. They could guess that Dean spared no effort to help them because he was worried that they would die. No one would kill the masters of the inner wall for him. Both sides were taking advantage of each other. Hurry up and heal. We'll go back as soon as your injuries are healed. We can't delay, or the next attack will be more difficult. Dean said to the 3 of them. Stooped old man's lips slightly moved. He wanted to say something, but soon stopped. He closed his eyes and focused on healing his injuries. Fatty saw his reaction and immediately understood his thoughts. He didn't talk to Dean, but took out the healing medicines for himself. Dean's eyes flashed as he saw that the 3 of them were in a hurry to heal. He sat on the throne and put his palm on the armrest. His fingertips touched the groove on the inside of the armrest and gently pressed it. A slight cracking sound echoed throughout the temple. The sound was so soft that even a hunter might not be able to hear it. However, the hunchbacked old man and his two companions had keen hearing. They immediately sensed the abnormality and raised their heads to look around. In the next moment, a pitch-black hole appeared on the pillars, walls, and ground of the divine temple. Water arrows shot out from the hole and into the hall below the stairs. The three of them's face changed. Although they didn't know the reason, they knew that it wasn't a good thing. Just as the three of them were ready to get up and hide, their bodies suddenly froze. They stood or sat in the same place as if they were stunned. The stooped old man was stunned for a moment before his eyes widened in anger. He abruptly stood up from his chair, and a pair of demonic wings sprouted from his back. He floated in the air, his eyes filled with anger and killing intent as he turned to look at the throne. When he looked back, he saw Dean sitting on the throne, sinking. "You trash, get ready to die. Your seventh brother has been killed by me. Do you want to go back? Obediently die." Dean changed his previous reserved appearance and looked at stooped old man contemptuously. Stooped old man's pupils shrank as he heard Dean's words. He was so angry that his eyes almost burst out. It was obvious that they were deceived by Dean. The most important thing was that the seventh brother who was responsible for the return trip was dead. No wonder he saw the seventh brother's finger in the second auction. He was puzzled at that time, but he didn't dare to think about it. Now it seemed that the seventh brother was obviously dead. Dean just used the seventh brother's body to pretend that the seventh brother was in his hands. He wanted to take advantage of them. "Ah!" The stooped old man roared as he rushed towards Dean. "Go to—" He hadn't finished the last word when a fire instantly spread throughout the temple. It was as if a hole had been pierced in the sky. The monstrous flames and thick smoke instantly submerged everything. If one looked down from the sky, they would see that the sacred Utopia mountain had exploded at this moment. Wu Tuol Mountain, which was more than 400 meters tall, exploded like a volcano. The destructive explosion produced a deafening boom. The streets more than 10 kilometers away from the Divine Mountain were swept up by the violent wind generated by the explosion. The pedestrians on the streets were instantly blown away, and some of the fluttering merchant flags were even snapped in half. Countless tiny stones and metal shards shot out. Some pedestrians on the streets were shot through the head or body by the stones. The destructive heat waves spread out, sweeping up the thick fog and dust into every street. With the entire holy mountain as the center, it was as if a magnitude 12 earthquake had occurred. The ground rumbled and the dust was like a beast tide that engulfed everything. This explosion happened in an instant. At the moment of the explosion, the entire Wu Tuol Mountain was instantly destroyed. Like a delicate porcelain suddenly shattering, the mountain was blown into ashes. The destructive power of doomsday spread out. The Knights of Light who were patrolling the mountain, as usual, did not even have the time to react. In an instant, they were engulfed by the explosion, their bodies shattered and evaporated. The aftershock of the explosion spread quickly. It was more than 10 times more violent than the explosion of the Wall of Sighs. At this moment, people in all areas of the commercial district felt the ground shaking and trembling. They also heard the angry explosion coming from the distance. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked up in the direction of the sound source in amazement. In an office of the military headquarters, the teacup on Richelieu's table fell down. The tea soaked the documents he had just processed, but his eyes were staring blankly at the direction of Utopia Mountain outside the window. The corner of his mouth was slightly trembling. With a swoosh, a large number of stones were ejected from the explosion of the Divine Mountain. Among them, a pitch-black oval-shaped object flew out along with the stones. After flying for 200 to 300 meters horizontally from the top of the Divine Temple that was hundreds of meters high, it fell on the ground in a parabolic trajectory and hit a castle. It penetrated the castle and landed in the courtyard of the castle. It rolled over a dozen times before stopping, black smoke rising from it. This was not a stone, but an elliptical metal ball 5 or 6 meters high. But at this moment, the metal ball was broken at one end. Chapter 779. With a clang, a sharp claw suddenly extended from the edge of the crack. Immediately after, a terrifying shadow with sharp blades all over its body emerged from within, scaring the curious hound into whining and running away. The ferocious figure was Dean. He slowly crawled out of the metal ball. He couldn't help but cough every time he crawled out. Blood splashed on the ground. He grimaced in pain. It took a lot of effort to drag his body out. He turned over and lay on the ground, gasping for breath. Drowsiness overcame him, forcing him to keep his eyes open. After resting for a moment, he crawled up from the ground, his body swaying. A few sharp blades on his back had broken off and stabbed into his body, causing quite a bit of injury. The biggest wound was caused by a piece of metal on his chest, which had pierced through his demonized armor and stuck in his ribs, bleeding nonstop. Fortunately, he had entered the metal ball and displayed his demonic body. Otherwise, this piece of metal would not just be stuck in his ribs, it would have pierced through his chest and killed him on the spot. He took a light breath to relieve the burning pain on his body. He looked up at the direction of the explosion in the distance. There was a trace of palpitation in his eyes. He didn't expect the destructive power of the explosion to be so terrifying. When he activated the explosive device, he had already sunk into the protective cabin. The protective cabin was made of tungsten steel and was incomparably tough. However, it was penetrated by the shock wave of the explosion. The aftershock almost took half of his life. It must be known that he had used his demonic body to protect himself. If he hadn't felt it, he couldn't imagine what would have happened to him. He thought of the old man and the other two. At the last moment, except for the old man who broke away from the electric current, the fat man and the other burly man seemed to be in a state of paralysis. It was almost impossible to make a protective response in that state. Even if they woke up in time, it would be difficult to react. Moreover, the power of the gunpowder explosion in Mount Wutua had exceeded his expectations. He had thought that it would be good if it could seriously injure the three of them. But judging from the current situation, the three of them had less than a 10% chance of surviving. He had deliberately exposed the death of the black-robed young man to the hunchbacked old man in order to infuriate him and make him chase him. Then, he would lead the old man to the second base. There were twice as many wind and solar power stations and more than 3 times as many explosives as here. There was a great chance that he could blow up the hunchbacked old man, but judging from the current situation, it was most likely not necessary. Now that he thought about it, he still felt a burst of fear. After all, he was not an explosives expert. His estimation of explosives was not so accurate, especially such a large amount of explosives. Even a professional explosives expert might not be able to estimate how much damage it would cause. After all, there were no advanced instruments from the old era that could evaluate specific detailed data. If there were more explosives in Mount Wutal, or if he had not prepared the tungsten steel protective cabin, he would probably have died in the explosion and perished together with the 3 intruders. Fortunately, such a mistake did not happen. Otherwise, he would really want to cry, but have no tears. Looking at the gradually subsiding explosion in the distance, Dean exhaled lightly and slowly stood up. His muscles immediately affected the metal plate on his chest. He slightly bared his teeth and made up his mind. The demonization of his body was lifted, and he returned to his human appearance. He raised his hand to cover the huge metal plate stuck in his chest and pulled it out. Puff! A violent tearing pain almost made him cry out in pain. Fortunately, the violent pain was only temporary. He gritted his teeth and used the dragon blood technique to control the flow of blood in his body. He stopped the bleeding in his chest. He felt as if his chest was being burned by fire, and the pain was unbearable. However, he had experienced this degree of pain many times. He took a few deep breaths and let himself adapt. He dragged his feet in the direction of Mount Wuta. His pupils entered the state of X-ray vision, searching for the figures of the 3 intruders. Although the power of the explosion was enough to kill them, he could not relax until he saw their bodies. The explosion came very abruptly and ended very quickly as well. The gunpowder burned out in an instant, and the curtains fell on the ground. Wutuo Mountain was no longer a tall mountain, only thick smoke and dust that rose up like a tall mountain. Inside the smoke, there was a faint blood-red flame that looked terrifying. Dean walked to the original square in front of the mountain. His eyes penetrated the thick fog and immediately saw the destructive traces brought by the terrifying explosion. The area more than 100 meters around Mount Wutuo was completely sunken. Whether it was the square or the castle-like buildings, they were all razed to the ground. The street more than 200 meters away was also a mess. The road was full of gravel and thick dust, and there were passers-by screaming on the ground. Dean's scalp tingled. Although he was only standing on the ground at the moment, a picture emerged in his mind. The entire Mount Wutuo had completely disappeared. The ground at the foot of the mountain had collapsed into a huge crater. Burning smoke was emitted from the soil. The land had experienced the baptism of explosives and became incomparably black, like human skin that had been burned. Except for this big crater, there was nothing left here. Many buildings on the mountain, the temple, the laboratory, the monument of the goddess, and so on were all gone. It seemed that they had never existed. For the first time, Dean witnessed such a terrible destruction. The first thought in his mind was that the world had started nuclear weapons in the old era. Black gunpowder alone had such a terrible effect. No wonder there was no peace in the world after the nuclear explosion. Just like the ruins outside the giant wall, the nuclear radiation in the air was still silently invading the bodies of the survivors after more than 300 years. He took a deep breath and looked around. The old man and the other two were likely to be blown away and fell in a place far away. He stimulated his magic wings and rushed into the thick smoke and black fog. He squinted his eyes and searched around. At the same time, he was vigilant of the surroundings, guarding against possible sneak attacks at any time. 4 or 5 minutes later, Dean found a figure on the west side of Mount Wutuo. The heat source concentration was limited. He immediately rushed over and saw the figure lying in the ruins of a building that had been smashed by gravel. It was the old man. At the moment, the old man seemed to have fainted. His body was covered with scars. Large and small gravel and metal pieces were embedded in his body. In addition, one of his legs was blown off. His hair was burnt black and fluffy. Dean's heart relaxed. His eyes were slightly bright. There was an unexpected feeling of surprise. He took out the dagger that he carried with him and slammed it toward the old man's throat. Ding! The dagger stabbed into the old man's throat, but was blocked by the demonized scales on his neck. Chapter 780. At this moment, Dean was extremely nervous. He was worried that the old man would pretend to be unconscious and deliberately lure him closer. But he had to make a move. There was only one chance. If the old man really fainted, then his caution would be stupid. Whoosh! Dean's sharp limbs instantly approached the old man, all pointing at the weak parts of the old man's body. Dean's heart was in his throat. The next moment, the sharp limbs all hit the old man. But the old man's fine scales were extremely tough, beyond Dean's imagination. They were far harder than steel. The old man's sharp limbs barely pierced into the old man's body, but failed to penetrate. At this time, the old man seemed to be stimulated by the pain. He groaned and opened his eyes. Seeing the old man open his eyelids, Dean's heartbeat almost stopped. The gap in strength between the two made him feel the crisis of death instantly. His brain was hot. He roared and madly waved all the sharp limbs to stab out. Die! He roared. The sickle-like limbs turned into countless afterimages, madly shooting out. The speed was so fast that it was only a phantom. He didn't know how long the attack lasted. When Dean felt a sense of extreme weakness in his heart, he slowly woke up. The fast-waving sharp limbs also slowly stopped. He looked at the old man in front of him, but saw that the old man's body was broken. There was no sound, and his death was tragic. There were bloody holes in the old man's throat, chest, head, and other fatal parts. Especially the neck. It was almost completely broken, leaving only a trace of blood hanging. Dean couldn't help but lift a few sharp limbs to stab the old man's body along the wound. He lifted the old man's body and repeatedly looked at it several times. Finally, he was sure that the old man was dead. His heartbeat had stopped. Through X-ray, he could see that the old man's heart was cut into a small piece, and the spine and the neck was cut off. He was dead. The ruler of the giant wall was dead. He died in front of him. Dean had an unreal feeling. All of this seemed to be much easier and smoother than he had expected. The second base that he had prepared as the next trap was completely useless. He breathed heavily, and only after a long time had passed did he slowly regain his calmness. With a wave of his arm, the stooped elder's head was completely cut off. Then he carried the elder's head and soared into the air, flying above the ruins of the explosion. He looked around, searching for the remaining two intruders' figures. Even though there were no other high-level heat being released at the scene, he couldn't rule out the possibility that they were hiding their heat. If he was alive, he wanted to see him. If he was dead, he wanted to see his corpse. Otherwise, his heart would not be at peace. Half an hour later, Dean finally found the bodies of the other two intruders. Half of the fat man's head and one of the arms of the burly man. There was also a magic hunting tool. Dean flew back to the old man's broken headless body. Now he was basically sure that all three intruders died here. It was inconceivable that the intruders who were a headache to the inner wall had died in his hands. However, he had mobilized almost all the resources of the outer wall in order to prepare for this day. He had filled the mountain with more than 1,000 tons of gunpowder. He had spent a lot of manpower on mining and production. In addition, he had lured the intruders here so that they would be defenseless. It was a crucial step. Any mistake in this step could lead to a different situation. His purpose of detonating the wall was to make the three of them relax their vigilance in addition to blocking the pursuit of the inner wall. It must be known that the impact of intentional and unintentional resistance were two completely different levels. He heaved a sigh of relief and felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. His physical strength seemed to have been completely overdrawn. He sat on the ground to rest and recover. At the same time, he took out another signal tube from his bag and pulled it open. A green smoke bomb immediately rose into the sky. After a moment, the sound of horses' hooves echoed. Noyce led a team of Knights of Light. Noyce and the Knights of Light were aghast as they saw the ruins around Dudian. If it wasn't for the outline of the surrounding buildings, they wouldn't dare to imagine that this huge pit was Utopo Mountain, which was full of holy flowers. Noyce ran over as he saw Dean's pale face. "Master, how are you? Are the invaders all dead?" "Dead," Dean panted. "Send people to block this place and find the pieces of their bodies. Also send someone to bring Aisha. I'm going to the inner wall." Noyce was relieved as he heard that the intruders were dead. He knew that the main purpose of the plan was to kill the intruders. But he didn't expect that would be over before Dean could finish the last step of the plan. He looked at the terrible wound on Dean's chest. He took out the healing and antidotes from his bag and handed them to Dean. "The intruders have been dealt with. Why do you still want to go to the inner wall? Why don't you wait for your injuries to heal first?" Dean took the medicine and said, "The master of the inner wall is seriously injured. I have to kill her before she recovers. Otherwise, it will be difficult to find such an opportunity in the future. If I don't come back, then it's likely that I won't be able to come back. Let Sergei and the others leave the Holy Church and live incognito." Noyce's heart throbbed as he listened to Dean's last words. "Master, don't be discouraged. You will definitely come back. You're the only person who has escaped from Thornflower Prison for hundreds of years. What is this little difficulty?" Dean smiled bitterly. The escape from Thornflower Prison was nothing to him. But it seemed that it left a deep impression in Noyce's heart. Dean sighed. He thought that if he had more pioneers to help him, then his chances of survival would be much higher. Unfortunately, he could only fight alone. Aisha was the only one who could accompany him. Noyce saw the bitterness in Dean's eyes. He wanted to say something, but he held back. He knew that it was useless to encourage Dean at this moment, but it seemed that it left a deep impression in Noyce's heart. He thought that if he had more pioneers to help him, then his chances of survival would be much higher. Unfortunately, he could only fight alone. Aisha was the only one who could accompany him. Dean patted Noyce's shoulder. Don't worry. Aisha will accompany me. Nothing will happen. Go and bring her here. I'll heal first. I know. Noyce took a deep breath and nodded. He turned around and ordered a group of Knights of Light to guard Dean. Dragon Mother hasn't chased after us. Most of the sequelae have flared up, and she needs to recuperate. Otherwise, she wouldn't miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I hope that the dragon family doesn't have any medicine that can restore her combat effectiveness. Otherwise, it will be a disaster. Dean sat on the ground. A young Knight of Light put a stone on his back to lean on. Dean looked at the young knight and thanked him. He used dragon blood technique to speed up the recovery of his injuries. At the same time, he was thinking about the chances of going to the inner wall. The young knight knew that Dean was a big shot. He was flattered and stayed with the other Knights of Light to guard Dean. Dean's injuries were almost healed after 2 hours. Noyce sent Aisha to Dean. Dean's last order to Aisha was to stay in place. But in her mind, there was no such thing as stay in place. She just needed to keep her body stiff. That's why she could be transported to the second base by Noyce and from the second base to here. Dean got up and took Aisha's hand. He took a deep look at her face and whispered, "This time it's very likely that you will have to make a move. It's a great opportunity. You won't be angry, right?" Aisha was silent. Dean held her hand and looked at Noyce. "I'm going. I'll leave the matters here to you." Noyce was worried. "Be careful." He didn't use honorifics, but his words were more sincere than ever. Dean looked at him and nodded. "I will." He flew towards the inner wall with Aisha in his arms. Flying high up in the sky, he could see everything on the ground more clearly. He saw that Mount Wu Tuo had disappeared, and in its place was a huge, charred crater. In the surrounding 7 to 8 miles of streets, there were faintly visible earthquake-like cracks, and the aftermath of the explosion spread very far. Dean saw a lot of civilians gathering in the direction of Wu Tuo Mountain. He was afraid that there would be no more Wu Tuo Mountain from now on. He liked this mountain in his heart. Perhaps it was because of the difference between its name and the word utopia in the old era. But both were symbols of beauty. When he flew to the wall, Dean suddenly saw a shocking scene. The wall that had been erected for more than 200 years had a huge hole in it. The edge of the hole was somewhat black, and there was a faint smell of blood and gunpowder near the hole. In addition, there were some soldiers stationed here, including 2 pioneers. The reason why Dean dared to pass through here was that he didn't see any pursuers during the more than 2 hours of recuperation. So he inferred that the pursuers should be injured by the explosion and didn't dare to continue to pursue. At the moment, there were only 2 pioneers, and they seemed to be ordinary pioneers. Dean didn't hesitate and immediately swooped down. The 2 pioneers also saw Dean flying in the sky. Their faces suddenly changed. They hurriedly ordered the patrolling soldiers to send out a signal flare. Dean quickly landed and put Aisha on the wall. Then he stimulated the demon body and rushed towards the 2 pioneers. The 2 pioneers didn't dare to hold back. They stimulated the demon body at the first time. The young pioneer was the Black Weaver. After stimulating the demon body, she immediately drilled into the rock. The other one was like a porcupine. His whole body was covered with steel thorns. His hands turned into claws. He crawled on the ground and fled quickly. Dean flapped his wings and instantly accelerated to catch up with him. The sharp blade on his back suddenly stabbed out. Puff! Puff! The blade easily penetrated the pioneer's body like piercing tofu. With a swing of the strange limb, the pioneer's body was instantly halved. Blood and intestines flowed everywhere. He was directly killed. After several battles with pioneers, Dean's current combat experience was different from the past. Ordinary pioneers were not his opponents. Although these ordinary pioneers had fought far more than Dean, their combat skills were not necessarily better than his. Some people had fought 10 times and gained more experience than those who had fought hundreds of times. This kind of people were usually called geniuses, and Dean was such a genius. Moreover, the abnormal part of the Splitter's magic mark was its terrible cutting power. There were few opponents of the same level, not to mention that Dean's physique was a grade higher than the opponent's. Whoosh! Dean turned around and flew back to Aisha hugged her body, and continued to fly forward, ignoring the black weave magic mark pioneer who had burrowed into the ground. Entering the inner wall area, he flew over the wilderness and went straight to the dragon family's territory. After about 2 hours, Dean finally came to the dragon family's territory. Unlike the rock family, the dragon family did not build their territory in the cities, but in the suburbs outside the two cities, connecting the two cities. The dragon family lived in the mountains, surrounded by peaks. If one walked in, it was very easy to get lost. "Who are you? Stop!" In front of the mountain gate, 8 dragon family guards on duty shouted at Dean. Dean's eyes flashed coldly. He suddenly accelerated and swooped down toward them. Seeing Dean approaching at high speed, the 8 people's faces changed. There was a trace of panic in some of their eyes. They saw Dean's terrible strength, but they did not dare to escape because of their duty. All of them pulled out their weapons and rushed to Dean. Puff, 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 puff. Dean's figure flew straight, almost without a pause. Behind him, a blood mist exploded. The bodies of the 8 Lemeter guards were broken, and they died on the spot. "This is the family you have been guarding. I haven't seen you for a short time, but you can't even recognize me." Dean held Aisha and flew up the stairs, his eyes cold. They all deserved to die. Aisha was held in Dean's arms like a princess. She was silent, but her pure black eyes seemed to flash slightly. Dean quickly flew to the hillside. There was a large building, the style of which was a bit like the ancient houses of the East. It was built with wood and had a unique charm. At this moment, the guard station in the hillside square saw Dean and immediately shouted angrily. Chapter 781. Dean turned a blind eye to the constant gathering of guards on the hillside square. He descended from the sky with Aisha in his arms. His magic wings retracted behind his back, and the terrifying sharp blades on his body fell to the ground, leaving a groove on the floor. He put Aisha down, took her hand, and whispered, "You will see your father later. I will ask him why he indulges Haley so much. Is his blood as cold as my hands?" Aisha was silent and let him lead her. Dean looked up and stepped forward, looking down on everything. "Stop! Who dares to break into my dragon family's territory? Go forward and kill him." The guards gathered in front of Dean, blocking his way, and said with a ruthless look. Some of the guards saw Dean holding Aisha's hand, and their eyes showed a surprised and uncertain look. At the moment, Aisha's face was covered with a veil, but this thin layer of veil couldn't hide her beautiful appearance. Her clothes and temperament made them think of a person. Seeing that Dean didn't stop, several guards finally couldn't bear it. They roared, waved their weapons, and rushed toward Dean. Puff! Puff! Several guards rushed toward Dean, but their bodies suddenly froze in place, and their faces were full of disbelief. Dean's eyes were indifferent as he held Aisha's hand and walked straight ahead. Several guards barely turned their eyes and stared at Dean in horror. The next moment, a lot of blood spurted out from their necks and chests. The impact of the blood broke their bodies and split them into a pile of body parts. Then they fell to the ground. Other guards saw such a strange scene, and the anger on their faces suddenly disappeared. Their faces were full of horror, and they kept retreating. Dean walked from the gate of the hillside to the square, and the guards also retreated from the gate to the square. Whoosh! A figure rushed out from the hall behind the square and landed in front of the guards with a few leaps. It was a handsome young man. When he saw Dean's terrifying demonic body, his face slightly changed. Obviously, Dean's physique was at the pioneer level, and he had never seen such a demonic body shape before. It should be a rare legendary monster. The next moment, his eyes noticed Dean holding Aisha's hand, and he suddenly froze in place. Dean's footsteps didn't stop, and he was still moving forward step by step. It seemed that nothing could stop his pace. Feeling the amazing murderous aura, the handsome young man recovered and couldn't help but shout to Aisha, "Your Highness, you're finally back. We heard that you had an accident in the wasteland. It's great to see you back. Who is this?" He still had a lot to say, but seeing Dean's murderous aura, he had to open his mouth. Aisha naturally wouldn't answer him. Dean replaced Aisha's mouth, and his voice was very cold. "Get out of here if you don't want to die. Let the patriarch and dragon mother come out to see me, or your dragon clan will die." The handsome young man was stunned. He didn't expect Dean's tone to be so arrogant, and he was accompanied by Aisha. He couldn't believe it. How could Aisha be with such a person? But seeing that Aisha didn't respond, he already knew what she meant. His face quickly sank. "It's impossible to see the patriarch and dragon mother. Your Highness, you can't let this person mess around. He has killed our clansmen, and if he continues, he will become the #1 wanted target of our dragon clan. Kill him." Dean's eyes flashed coldly, and he no longer said anything. He let go of Aisha's hand and let her stand in place. The next moment, his figure suddenly rushed out, like a black phantom, and swept towards the handsome young man. The handsome young man's pupils shrank as he said in horror, "You dare!" His words stopped abruptly as his head flew high. Dean's sharp limbs trembled slightly as the head was about to hit the ground and split the head into two halves. He stepped over it and turned back to Aisha. He took her hand and continued to move forward. The handsome young man probably didn't expect that only 2 people would dare to kill in the dragon clan. Moreover, one of them was Aisha. All the dragons knew that Aisha had sheltered the dragon clan many times. He didn't expect Dean to attack because of Aisha's presence. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to let Dean get close to him, even if he was careless. Whoosh, whoosh. On the distant hillside, 2 figures flew fast, one in front and one behind. At the same time, there was a rustling sound from the foot of the hill and the sound of robes fluttering in the wind. Dean's pupils expanded to the maximum, and he saw blazing figures coming from all directions. All of them were pioneer-level masters, and many of them were at the peak of the outer wilderness. So far, there was no inner wilderness master. He was secretly relieved when he watched Yulida gather all the forces to besiege the invaders in the Pagel Mountains. He noticed that there were only 7 inner wilderness masters. In the battle in King City not long ago, Dragon Mother was the only one who was an inner Baron level master of the Dragon Tribe. Those who had reached the inner Baron level were basically the leaders of all forces. He had predicted the worst, that there would at most be 1 inner Baron level master in the Dragon Tribe's territory. But now, it seemed that there was not even one. "You once said that you don't have any friends. I'm the only friend you can talk to." Dean looked at the approaching pioneers with bloodthirsty, killing intent in his eyes. He whispered to Aisha, "Even if there are your friends among them, they deserve to die." Aisha was indifferent and didn't respond. At this time, pioneers from all directions arrived one after another. Dean released Aisha's palm and aimed at the pioneers who arrived first. His figure moved and suddenly jumped out, trying to kill as many as possible before all the pioneers gathered. The first to arrive was an old man in his 60s. He was thin, but his movements were extremely fast. He was shocked and angry when he saw the pools of blood on the square, the pieces of corpses on the ground, and the headless corpses. He roared and rushed toward Dean. However, Dean happened to rush towards him. Feeling Dean's amazing killing intent, the anger in Miff's heart was like cold water poured on his head. He sobered up in an instant. As an older pioneer who had participated in more than 5 hunting operations in the wasteland, the intuition brought by his combat experience told him that Dean in front of him was extremely dangerous and not someone he could match. He immediately braked, stimulated the demon body, and turned to run. The scene looked rather comical, and the guards who were waiting for reinforcements were dumbfounded. Whoosh! Dean's magic wings flapped, and the blade-like limbs on his back stretched in a strange posture. If there was a wind magic master here, you would find that each of Dean's blade-like limbs had a strange streamline, which could greatly reduce air resistance and even accelerate with the help of wind. This was the reason why the blade-like limbs' attack speed was beyond that of ordinary pioneers of the same rank. Dean was like a wild beast with its own propeller. In the blink of an eye, he caught up with Miff, and his arms quickly stretched out. Miff felt the terrible killing intent coming from his back. He turned around in horror and the two new demonized arms under his armpits hurriedly grabbed. These arms were made of demonization, and when the demon body was removed, they would disappear. On the contrary, no matter how serious the injuries were, they would recover when the demon body was stimulated again. Therefore, in this instant, his first reaction was to block Dean's attack with the help of the demonized arms. Puff, puff, puff. 3 cutting sounds sounded almost at the same time, like a sharp knife cutting 3 pieces of cloth. The 2 demonized arms were cut off by Dean's scythe without any hindrance, and directly pierced into his back. Dean turned his arms, and blood spurted out. Miff's heart was instantly broken, and his eyes were panic-stricken. He fell to the ground and rolled several times. After killing this person, Dean did not stop. His eyes had already locked on the second target. He slightly turned his body, changed direction, and rushed to the second person. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of this person. This person's reaction was the same as Miff's, from anger to panic. When he wanted to escape, it was too late, and Dean quickly caught up and beheaded him. These pioneers' magic marks were good at speed, but they still couldn't escape from Dean. The horror of legendary magic marks was that even if they were the ultimate attack-type splitters, their speed and perception were not inferior to ordinary rare magic marks. This could be seen from their transparent pupils, super range vision, and speed close to that of inner desolate level masters. After Dudian killed 2 people, the other pioneers who heard the news seemed to be aware of the changes here. The next moment, they gathered together. Dean aimed at the target and killed halfway. After killing 2 more people, the rest of the pioneers finally gathered together, but the number was only 5. Counting the 1 killed by Dean, there were a total of 9 people. Dean licked his lips, looking at the 5 pioneers who rushed together. 2 of them had reached the peak heat source of the outer desolate level, but Dean was not afraid. Instead, he felt inexplicably excited. The smell of blood on his body made him have a crazy impulse. Miff, Clancy. The 5 people were shocked, sad, and angry when they saw the 2 bodies falling on the edge of the square. One of the outer desolate level middle-aged man saw Dean, frowned, and whispered, "Be careful. This person should be the intruder. We can't let him go." Although he knew the existence of Dean in the outer wall, he was not interested in it, so he didn't know too much about it. Moreover, there were no photos in this era, only portraits, so he didn't recognize Dean. When the others heard the word intruder, the anger in their eyes suddenly became stronger. One of them roared and took the lead to rush over. Dean also rushed to the 5 people at high speed. It was the most suitable for him to deal with these pioneers in the battle against Dragon Mother. Go! The others roared, stimulated their own demonic bodies, and swarmed toward Dean. Dean's speed didn't decrease, and his blade-like limbs expanded outward like a weird ball full of sharp blades, which made people's scalp tingle. 2 of the 5 pioneers were assassins with weak defense, and they were good at hiding and using poison. At this moment, seeing Dean's ferocious demonic body, they felt a toothache and immediately rushed to the side, not daring to touch him. When Dean rushed out, he paid attention to the expressions of the 5 people, and soon locked on the 2 dodging people as his targets. He knew that often the lack of a certain aspect would be strengthened in another aspect, just like a splitter magic mark, which was good at attacking but very weak in defense. However, his weak defense was only relative to other legendary magic marks. In terms of pure defense, it was only slightly inferior to the rare steel dragon magic mark. Whoosh! Dean rushed to one of the dodging people. Seeing Dean's speed, this person thought that he would meet the other 3 head-on, but he didn't expect that Dean would suddenly turn to kill him. His heart suddenly turned cold, and he knew that it was not good. He turned around and ran, trying to keep a distance from Dean. He complained in his heart. He couldn't figure out why Dean would attack him from afar. Moreover, he would fall into a situation where he would be attacked from both sides. The gains were not worth the losses. He even suspected that he had inadvertently offended Dean, but in his impression, there was no such person. Go to hell! A knight holding a spear roared and stabbed from behind Dean. The magic spear in his hand was a standard 4-meter-long lance. Although there was no horse, it was still extremely flexible in his hands. After all, his demonic body was nearly 4 meters tall, extremely thin, and his arms were very thin. His body looked soft like rubber, and there was a thin film on his spine like cicada wings. His demonic body was not much different from that of a human, but his skin was as gray as a corpse. However, this didn't mean that his demonic body was incomplete. On the contrary, his original body was less than 2 meters tall, but now it was nearly 4 meters tall. Although the body structure was similar to that of a human, it was also a complete demonic form. This was the form of a ghoul magic mark. Dean's blade-like limbs suddenly popped out and swept to the lance. 2 clangs sounded, and the lance was cut off. The knight was stunned for a moment, and his face was aghast. He didn't expect the blade-like limbs to be so terrifying. It was simply cutting iron like mud. If he was a little closer, he estimated that his whole body would be cut into several pieces. How could he fight in close combat? The other 2 also saw this scene, and their eyes were full of horror. The speed of the pursuit couldn't help but slow down, and they didn't know how to attack. Dean suddenly accelerated, shook off the 3 people, and quickly caught up with the person in front of him who was running away. No, the screams came to an abrupt end. When Dean's body was 3 meters away from his back, the sharp blade-like limbs flashed and turned into several afterimages. The next moment, Dean's body swept past, leaving a pile of body parts in the same place. Dean quickly turned and killed the other person. Chapter 782. Stop! Just as Dean was about to catch up with her, an angry roar sounded. Dean glanced at the source of the voice, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The one who spoke was the current patriarch of the Dragon Clan. He was rushing down the steps from the slope. Dean snorted and suddenly accelerated. He quickly got close to the back of the round-faced young woman, and his sharp limbs shot out. The round-faced young woman was shocked, and her eyes were full of despair. She gritted her teeth, and her abdomen suddenly bulged. As Dean approached, she suddenly turned her head and spat out a green mucus. Puff! Puff! Dean's sharp limbs easily penetrated her body, as if stabbing into a bubble. But at the same time, the green mucus spat out by the round-faced young woman stained the sharp limbs. Dean felt a corrosive burning sensation from the sharp limbs. His face changed slightly, and he immediately released the demon body. The black fluid condensed into the demon hunter knife, and the green mucus appeared on the knife. When the demon body was released, the demon hunter knife returned to a weapon, and the connection between it and Dean's body was cut off. He looked at the green mucus on the knife and smelled the stench. He immediately tore a piece of clothes from the round-faced young woman in front of him, rolled it into a ball, and wiped off the mucus, trying not to let it touch his body. Although this round-faced young woman was just an ordinary pioneer, a pioneer who was good at using poison couldn't be judged with common sense. Even if it was a poison created by a Lamiter, if it was injected into a pioneer's blood, it would still be easily killed. He was glad that he used the demonic limbs to block the green mucus. If it fell on his body, even if he didn't die, his fighting strength would be greatly reduced. Mudley looked at the body of the round-faced young woman, and his eyes were slightly swollen. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Our Dragon Clan has no enmity with you. Even if we caught you before, it was because Aisha privately taught you the secret technique, which violated the rules. You owe us a favor. Not only did we not kill you, but we also gave you resources to improve your strength. How would you bite the hand that feeds you? Dean looked at him, and then glanced at the other 3 people who were chasing him. He faintly smiled with a bit of ridicule. So, the patriarch knows about me. I didn't expect you to remember that little person. Since you came out, I want to ask you something. Aisha and Hathaway are your daughters. Don't you know what kind of character they are? What do you mean? Mudley's face was gloomy. How could Aisha steal the secret technique? Her character is very easy to understand. It's impossible that you don't know about it. Dean's voice was cold. You also know that Hathaway has been jealous of her sister for so many years. This is clearly a trap. It's ridiculous that you know about it, but still stick to the rules and punish Aisha. She was born with awakening ability. She was cultivated as a saint since childhood. How much has she done for the family? Hasn't she fought to protect your family every day of her life? But what about you? How did you treat her? Mudley's expression changed slightly. He said in a deep voice, "This is her mission. If her sister had her talent, she would have received the same mission from a young age. This is the tradition of our dragon clan, and it is the same for other witch clans. This is not for you to criticize. Don't you think I would feel heartache for my own daughter? If you really feel heartache, then abolish the tradition for your daughter." Dean's eyes were cold. What qualifications do you have to be the patriarch if you can't protect your own daughter? What qualifications do you have to be her father? Even when she was in the wasteland, I didn't see your dragon clan grieve for her. Did anyone grieve for her? Did anyone go to the wasteland to look for her body? No. Dean's eyes were like a knife as he stared at Mudley. She is like a tool. When she is broken, she loses all her value and is abandoned by you. Is this the tradition of your family? It's true that you can prosper forever, but if this is the only way to maintain your prosperity, then what's the point of having this prosperity? Mudley angrily said, "What do you know? Do you think it's as simple as you think? Do you know how many members there are in a family? Do you think you can do whatever you want? Wasteland is dangerous. She is dead. If we send people to look for her, then the loss will be even greater. Losing her is already a heavy price that we can't accept. If we lose more people because of this, it will only bring about more negative effects." Dean was startled as he heard Mudley's words. He almost couldn't believe his ears. Such cold-blooded and selfish words could come out from the mouth of a father. He suddenly felt heartache and sadness. He felt heartache because Aisha had sheltered such a group of people from childhood to adulthood. He felt sad because the latter was telling him such words in an angry tone. Mistakes weren't terrible. What was terrible was that it wasn't a mistake in his cognition. This kind of thinking was the most difficult thing to change, even if he killed him. Dean was silent for a moment. He slowly said, "You can't afford to lose such a powerful fighting force. But you didn't see the love and loyalty behind this power. That is the most precious thing in the world, isn't it?" Mudley coldly said, "Of course I know. I don't need you to tell me. I can understand the thoughts of a superior." Dean said to himself, "The environment of a superior is very different from that of an ordinary person. Their first reaction is biased towards the perspective of interests. So they're used to thinking from the perspective of interest. However, thinking too much makes people utilitarian. When a person stares at one thing for a long time, he will slowly ignore other things. You're a qualified superior, but not an excellent one. Because understanding people's hearts is the most important thing. Countless emperors have fallen because of this." Mudley's face was gloomy. "What do you want to do here? Avenge her? Do you think Hathaway killed her? It means that you have a clear idea in your heart. It seems that you're also a person who deserves to die." Dean slightly raised his eyes and indifferently looked at him. "I wanted to spare your life because you are her father. But since you have a clear idea in your heart, you let her be killed in such an inexplicable way. But you didn't help her get justice. A father like you is not worthy." Mudley sullenly said, "They're my daughters. Although I have a guess, but this matter is unclear. Did you see with your own eyes that Hathaway framed her sister? Even so, I have lost a daughter. Do you want me to lose another one?" Chapter 783. Mudley's face slightly changed as he clenched his fists. "You dare to come here because you saw the battle between Dragon Mother and the invaders. You despicable villain. You didn't help the invaders when they invaded the giant wall. Don't you know that the people here will be plunged into misery and suffering? Do you think you can use them to strengthen yourself? They will kill you when no one in the inner wall can stop them." Dean was sure that Dragon Mother was recuperating at the moment as he saw Mudley's reaction. He calmed down. "So many masters have gathered here to visit Dragon Mother. I also want to visit her. Show me the way." "Bastard, do you think you are qualified to see Dragon Mother?" a handsome youth shouted in anger. Mudley said coldly, Do you think that you can trespass the territory of my dragon tribe just because the dragon mother is injured? If it wasn't for the fact that the intruder's whereabouts are unknown and the dragon mother is in charge, she would have come out and killed you long ago. It seemed that Dragon Mother was seriously overdrawn after using the ice blood disease. If she was forced to take action herself, then he would have to let Aisha fight against her. He wouldn't be able to fight against an inner Baron-level powerhouse, even if the latter was in a wounded state. He stared at Mudley's angry eyes and didn't show any weakness. You said so much because you are worried that I will let her take action. It seems that you know something about me. In that case, let me see Dragon Mother before I go on a killing spree. Mudley looked at him. You said that I am not worthy to be your father. Were you then? Although I don't know how you infected her and turned her into a corpse queen, but I advise you to free her. My daughter is not a tool for you to fight. Dean's face turned gloomy. I have never treated her as a tool for fighting. Mudley snorted. As far as I know, when Haley took people to kill you in the outer wall, it was because of her that you survived, right? You're just an outer-level pioneer. Even if you have the legendary magic mark of the Splitter, it is impossible for you to defeat Haley. Moreover, you have the magic scorpion god and the elder of the monastery with you. Do you dare to say that you didn't treat her as a tool? You brought her here because you are worried that you can't get out of here. So you let her take charge of the battle for you. Dean stared at him for a moment. I let her fight for me, but my purpose is different from yours. I believe that she will take the initiative to fight for me, even if she is conscious. But you let her guard the wasteland outside the giant wall day and night. This is not what she wants. But she has to do this for the family and the overall situation in your eyes, because she is your daughter. You even think that she should do this because she is a saintess. But none of you ever asked her if she was willing to be the saintess, and if this was what she was pursuing. Mudley's face slightly changed. Of course I know that she doesn't want to be a saintess. She sneaked out when she was a child but ran in the wrong direction and went to the outer wall. But why is she able to endure for so many years? How many people in this world can spend their whole life doing what they like and pursuing what they like? If she were here, do you think she would help you? This is the person she wanted to protect with all her might when she was alive. She can't refuse because her heart is too kind. If you don't exist, then she won't have so much pain. Even if there is pain, it will only be temporary. Dean's eyes were indifferent. I can give you a chance to live if you don't follow my path. I just want to get the highest power in the inner wall and use it to investigate the way to restore her. If there is no way to restore her consciousness, then go to the kingdom of God. I will restore her consciousness in my lifetime, even if I have to destroy all of you. Anyone who tries to stop me will die. You're crazy. Mudley looked at him in anger. How can a corpse restore consciousness? This is something that has never been heard for hundreds of years. Even the kingdom of God can't do it. You have killed so many people, but it is in vain. If killing people isn't enough, then kill the god. Dean's eyes were full of anger. You haven't been to the kingdom of God, so how do you know that it doesn't exist? Even if the kingdom of God doesn't exist, I will plunder the high-level resources of the world to create a way to restore her. I will bring her back from hell, even if she is dead. Mudley stared at him blankly. After a long time, he said, No matter what, don't even think about leaving this place today. You hurt my clansmen, and I will spare your life to pay for it. As for her, I will set her free after you die. She definitely doesn't want to see herself living like this. After all, this is what she hates the most. What do you know about freedom? Dean could not help but be furious. He suddenly made a move. His sharp limbs danced like a terrifying blade. His body suddenly swooped forward, but the moment he took 2 steps, he suddenly turned around and attacked in the opposite direction. The other 3 instinctively chased after Dean to stop him, but they were caught off guard by Dean's sudden attack. One of them was shocked as Dean instantly closed in on him. Puff, puff, puff. The man didn't have time to react as his body was cut into several pieces. His demonized body was covered with armor and looked extremely hard, but he was still killed in an instant. Seeing this scene, Mudley was furious. He roared and quickly demonized his body. His magic mark was the same as Haisha's, the dragon warrior's magic mark. It was ranked in front of Splitter among the legendary monsters. It had extraordinary defense and terrifying attack power. It was a rare magic mark with both offensive and defensive capabilities. Although its attack was slightly inferior to Splitter's, its defense was much better than Splitter's magic mark. Moreover, its flying speed was much faster than Splitter's. Except that it couldn't enter the ground, it was extremely strong in air and land battles. Moreover, it could spit high-fat dragon breath, which was the nemesis of many magic marks. He demonized into a dragon and roared. His feet turned into dragon claws and stepped on the ground, leaving cracks on the floor. He rushed at Dean at high speed. Dean felt the blazing energy behind him and had to turn back to attack. His sharp limbs gathered into a huge sharp spine and stabbed at Mudley's chest. Chapter 784. Dean snorted coldly. The sharp blades on his body stretched outwards. His feet dislocated and twisted. His body spun at a high speed like a top. The blades he wielded turned into an airtight sphere in an instant. The faces of the two people behind Mudley and Dean changed. They had to stop and retreat. As they retreated, the dancing blades suddenly stopped. Dean turned around and pounced on an outer desolate level old woman behind him. The rib-like blades in front of his chest reached for her head. The old woman was horrified. She hurriedly waved her sword to block. With two clangs, the sword was cut into 3 pieces. Dean was faster than the old woman. Although they were both at the peak of the outer desolate, his legendary magic mark and the physique enhancement brought by deification were close to that of an inner desolate level expert. In addition, one was pouncing forward and the other was retreating. In the blink of an eye, Dean closed in on her. "No!" The old woman screamed in horror. When her demon hunting tool was directly cut by Dean, she knew how terrifying Dean's blade-like limbs were. In close combat, she had almost no chance of winning. Mudley roared and rushed over, but it was too late. Puff! The blade-like limbs in front of Dean's chest quickly shot out and pierced the old woman's chest. His scythe-like arms danced and cut off the old woman's head from the bridge of the nose. The incision was smooth, and the brain tissue was trembling inside. Dean pulled back the blade-like limbs and turned to kill Mudley. Mudley's eyes were filled with anger. He held the long spear in his demonic dragon claw and stabbed it like lightning. It just avoided the blade-like limbs in front of Dean's chest and stabbed into his chest. Dean felt a sharp pain in his chest. It seemed that something was broken. He roared angrily and waved his hand to cut. With a clang, the long spear in Mudley's hand was broken. At the same time, the blade-like limbs in front of his chest slashed toward Mudley's chest. Mudley didn't dare to resist it. He withdrew and retreated, but he was still cut by the tip of the blade-like limbs. A blood mark appeared on the demonic scales on his chest, and blood oozed out. Puff! When Dean repelled Mudley, he heard the sound of water spurting behind him. He glanced over and saw the young and handsome pioneer puffed up his cheeks like a toad and spurted out a bloody mist. In Dean's eyes, the mist contained numerous weak heat sources, which seemed to be numerous tiny lives. Dean dodged sideways, but was still stained by the blood mist. After all, the scope of the blood mist was too large. His face darkened. This was probably a poison attack. He didn't pay attention to Mudley anymore. He flapped his devil wings and dashed towards this handsome pioneer. "Stop right there!" Mudley roared angrily. A fiery crack appeared on his throat. The next moment, his abdomen shriveled, as if he had taken a deep breath and suddenly exhaled toward Dean's back. Dragon breath. A strong flame spurted out of his mouth. The surrounding air instantly heated up, and the flame went straight to Dean's back. Dean noticed his movement from the corner of his eyes. From this posture, he knew that the pioneer was going to use dragon breath to distance himself. However, the length of the dragon breath was longer than he expected, and the speed was frighteningly fast. In a straight line, it almost rushed to his front in an instant. He dodged sideways, but the flame still touched his devil wings. Suddenly, A violent burning sensation came from his devil wings. He looked out of the corner of his eyes and saw that the devil wings were burning. The flames spurted out by the dragon breath were not extinguished. Instead, they stuck to the devil wings and burned fiercely. The sharp pain drove him crazy, but he didn't flap his devil wings to disperse the flames on them. Instead, like a devil god, he rolled up his burning devil wings and rushed towards the handsome pioneer at an extremely fast speed. Seeing Dean's ferocious face rushing toward him, the handsome pioneer panicked and retreated in horror. However, his speed was also not as fast as Dean. Before he ran 20 meters, Dean caught up with him in several steps. He waved the sharp limbs in front of his chest and hugged the handsome pioneer tightly in his arms. Blood sputtered from his arms. The handsome pioneer's body was torn apart into 7 or 8 pieces. Dean roared and turned around, looking at Mudley behind him. Now he was the only pioneer left here. "You!" Mudley looked at the pieces of body at Dean's feet, and his eyes turned red with anger. Almost all the pioneers who came here were the masters of their families, but they all fell at the feet of Dean. Even if he could kill Dean now, the dragon family would not be as strong as before. Moreover, his reason told him that if he continued to fight, he would also step into their path of retreat. "I don't want to kill you in front of her. Don't force me." Dean's eyes exuded monstrous killing intent. It seemed that the hostility hidden in his chest all broke out at this moment. However, he was still rational. He stared at Mudley and said, "If you surrender, I'll spare your whole family. If you resist, I'll kill every member of the dragon family." Mudley's face changed, and he said coldly, "How dare you? Even if I have to die with you, I'll kill you, despicable villain." Dean's eyes were full of killing intent. "Since you don't know life from death, don't blame me for being merciless." Then he suddenly turned around and rushed to the top of the mountain along the stairs. Seeing the direction Dean was going, Mudley's face changed, and he immediately chased after him. A large number of dragon family guards on the hillside had heard the news, and all of them were frontiersmen. Seeing Dean's horrifying demonic figure rushing over, these frontiersmen were frightened, but they still waved their weapons and rushed over. Dean's eyes were cold, and there was only the top of the mountain in his eyes. He rushed along the stairs. As he approached these guards, his sharp limbs stretched out, and with his impact, a large number of guards were besieging him fell down. Their bodies were cut into pieces, and their intestines, hands, and heads were scattered on the ground. Blood flowed and dyed the hillside steps red. It was like purgatory. Dean did not stop, and he quickly went up. There were several waves of guard along the way, but he ignored them. He just stretched out his sharp limbs and beheaded the guards who tried to get close to him. The advantage of Splitter's magic mark could be reflected in group battles. The shape of the strange blade was perfect, and it was very suitable for the chaotic group battle to cause double the damage. In the blink of an eye, Dean reached the top of the mountain. Mudley chased after him, but the distance between them was not shortened. Dean's eyes swept the whole top of the mountain, and he didn't see any heat source of other pioneers. But soon, he saw a lot of figures gathered in a hall on the top of the mountain, and it seemed that they were having a meeting. He immediately rushed to the hall, and with a bang, he kicked the door open. There were dozens of senior dragon family members sitting in the hall. Their body heat was ordinary, and they seemed to be senior civil servants, responsible for all aspects of the dragon family's affairs. Seeing that the door was suddenly kicked open, everyone in the hall stood up in fear. They had already received the news that there was an invasion at the foot of the mountain. Many of them were worried that the invaders were coming to attack the dragon family, so they had been waiting here uneasily. Dean kicked the door open like thunder, and everyone was startled. After all, they did not have the ability to perceive Dean's fast-approaching figure in advance. After Dean kicked the door open, his eyes passed the panicked senior dragon family members and fell on the top of the hall. He was slightly stunned. There was a dark golden coffin, about 5 meters high. His eyes were blocked by the coffin, and he couldn't penetrate it. But he observed the heat response in his eyes and found that the temperature around the coffin was extremely low. The 2 guards standing next to the coffin wore the same armor as the limitless guards outside, but their body heat source was only at the hunter level, and they seemed to be shivering with cold. Chapter 785. Whoosh! A gust of wind came from behind. Dean quickly bent down and pushed the sword in front of his chest. He moved horizontally to avoid the attack. Patriarch is here. The people in the hall were relieved to see Mudley appear at the door and repel Dean. They immediately ordered the guards to protect the dragon coffin. Mudley's face was gloomy as he looked at Dean. Where did you get the magic marks? Did she give it to you? Dean stood up and looked at him. Is Dragon Mother dead? Mudley's eyes slightly flashed. If she's the old lady, then it will be the sorrow of the entire Sylvia Giant Wall. Who else can resist the invaders except her? Only a stupid and despicable villain like you would expect such a thing to happen. Really? Dean ignored his sarcasm. She is in the coffin. I can feel it. If you don't tell me, I'll open it myself. Don't you dare. Mudley's eyebrows rose as he stepped in front of Dean. Do you think you can stop me? Dean looked at him coldly. Mudley roared and rushed forward. When he was close to the attack range of Dean's monster limbs, he suddenly moved to Dean's side. His abdomen bulged as he opened his mouth to spit out a blazing dragon flame. Dean had previously suffered from the dragon's breath, so he was already on guard at this moment. The moment his abdomen bulged, he knew that he was going to use the dragon's breath technique. When his mouth was slightly open, Dean suddenly squatted down and swept his sharp blade across his legs. The blazing dragon's breath rubbed over Dean's head, but didn't hit him. On the contrary, Mudley's demonized legs were cut by the monster limbs. Blood spurted out. Mudley staggered back 2 steps. There was anger in his eyes. He roared and rushed towards Dean. Dudian was startled as he saw the trace of madness in Mudley's eyes. He had a bad feeling and hurriedly retreated. But it was not convenient to retreat. Mudley soon caught up with him and closed to within 3 meters of him. This was also the attack range of Mudley's strange limbs. Without hesitation, he brandished his sharp blade and shot out. So. Like a rain of arrows whistling, Dean's sharp limbs pierced into Mudley's body, penetrating his shoulders, chest, arms, abdomen, and other parts. Dudian was startled, as he didn't expect that Dudian wouldn't dodge. In the next moment, his pupils constricted, and he revealed a trace of astonishment. Mudley opened his mouth slightly, and an extremely intense heat gathered in his mouth. The surrounding air was slightly distorted from the heat. It was definitely more than 1,000 degrees. He could not imagine how the human body could produce such a terrifying flame. Who? Dragon breath spewed out. The blazing fire was reflected in Dean's pupils. He felt as if he was about to be swallowed by the fire. The feeling of death made his hair stand on end. He wanted to pull out his sharp limbs to dodge, but it was too late. Who? Dragon breath flame enveloped Dean's face and chest and swept to his upper body. Shrill screams sounded in the flame. Dean's sharp limbs were burned and twisted. He struggled violently and immediately tore Mudley into pieces. Organs and limbs scattered on the ground. The flame was attached to Dean's face and chest, burning fiercely, just like the flame on his magic wings. Dean fell to the ground, rolling in pain. This time the pain was dozens of times more than the last time. The nerve endings on the magic wings were weak, so the feeling was not sensitive, but the face and chest were the places where the nerves were concentrated. The burning pain almost made his spirit collapse. He repeatedly rolled on the ground, trying to put out the flame. However, the dragon breath flame was a mixture of high-concentration fat and bile oil in Mudley's body. It could burn continuously. Even if it was spat on a metal plate, it could continue to burn for dozens of seconds until the high-fat oil in the flame was completely burned out. Screams that sounded like the screams of evil spirits rang out in the flames, and they continued without end, causing everyone in the hall to feel their scalps go numb and their bodies go cold. They stared blankly at Mudley's body scattered in front of Dean. They didn't expect that their patriarch would die like this. A long time passed. The blood-curdling screams seemed to have lasted for a century, but as the flames weakened, the The screams also gradually stopped. The flame was completely extinguished. Outside, the hall fell into silence. Only the deep, rough breathing could be heard. Inside the hall, there was also dead silence. Everyone looked out of the hall in horror, their faces pale. It was difficult to accept this fact. Slowly, a low laugh sounded outside the hall, like the grin of a devil. Then, a terrifying figure with sharp blades all over its body slowly climbed up and walked into the hall. Its trembling body seemed like it would collapse at any time. Seeing that the intruder hadn't died yet, everyone's eyes widened in fear. A few of them stood in a daze for a moment before gritting their teeth and standing in front of the others. The obstacle is finally removed. There was a strange smile on Dean's face. He was basically convinced that Dragon Mother was in the coffin. There was no sign of life. It was a bit like a memorial service. If Dragon Mother was dead, it meant that the goal he had been pursuing was finally in front of him. He slowly walked into the hall. There was only the coffin in his eyes. "Stop! Go to hell!" A series of angry shouts resounded. Although they were civil servants, there was no place for them to retreat. Some of them angrily rushed towards Dean to stop him. However, they couldn't get close to Dean's side. Dean's sharp limbs swept through their bodies. Their bodies were either cut in the waist or pierced through the chest. No one was able to get close to Dean. The others who were standing in the back were aghast as they saw the scene. At this moment, Dean was an arrow at the end of its flight and could fall at any time. They didn't expect him to have such terrifying strength. "Kill! Don't let him get close to Dragon Mother. Follow me." Roars resounded one after another. Under the pressure of the desperate situation of life and death, the crowd was forced to be courageous, and they rushed towards Dean one after another. It was a tragic scene. Dean's footsteps didn't stop. He continued to move forward step by step. The people who rushed towards him were cut off as soon as they stepped into his attack range. Severed limbs and blood flew around his body. Chapter 786. Dean felt the amazing chill emanating from the coffin. Under this chill, the burn pain on his face and chest seemed to lighten a lot. He took a deep breath and slowly lifted the sharp blade limb in front of his chest to resist the coffin. The chill spread from the tip and seemed to freeze his body. He gathered a little strength and stabbed out the sharp blade. The coffin was made of metal, but under the cutting of the sharp limbs, a gap was immediately cut out. A large amount of white cold air gushed out from the inside and rushed to Dean. The surrounding temperature seemed to plummet to the freezing point. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sharp limb quickly cut the coffin. The cold air spread to the surroundings. When the cold air almost dissipated, a beast-like figure emerged from the coffin. It was Dragon Mother. She was still in her demonized state when she fought with the invaders, but her body was covered with a layer of frost. She had turned into an ice sculpture without any signs of life. Dean was stunned. He was almost sure that this was Dragon Mother and not a fabricated sculpture. The charm between her eyebrows and her hair were lifelike, but there was no heat coming from her body. Dean saw through her body that her internal organs, blood, and heart were all in a frozen state. He was stunned for half a second before he suddenly realized what was going on. The sharp blade-like limb in front of his chest quickly swung out. After a few clangs, the Dragon Mother Eye sculpture was broken into pieces. Its head fell to the ground, but did not shatter as easily as ordinary ice cubes. Dean felt relieved after destroying the ice sculpture of Dragon Mother. Even if Dragon Mother wasn't dead, she was completely dead now. It meant that the only Dominator level in the inner wall was erased. The remaining Masters in the inner Baron level were nothing to worry about. He had planned for so long. He had done all kinds of bad things and sacrificed countless people. Glenn, who was next to him, also died in the execution of the mission. All of this was finally over. Ha ha ha. He laughed softly. His laughter was getting louder and louder until it spread throughout the hall. Since Haisha turned into a corpse, he had never laughed except in front of her. But at this moment, he laughed without any image. It even sounded a little crazy. I thought you were seriously injured, but I didn't expect that after using the power of the ice blood disease, you would turn into an ice sculpture and be completely crystallized. Is this the sequela of the ice blood disease? No wonder you didn't show this power before and didn't rely on this power to expand the power of the Dragon Clan and completely overpower the Rock Clan and the Wing Clan. It turns out that this power will lead to death. Dean looked at the scattered ice sculpture fragments on the ground and muttered to himself with a bitter smile. Several people hiding in the corner of the hall showed fear and anger in their eyes when they saw Dean destroy the ice sculpture of Dragon Mother. But in the end, there was only despair. One of them stood up in the corner and rushed toward Dean with grief and indignation. Dean didn't look back. As the man approached, he threw out a blade-like limb from his back and pierced through the man's roaring mouth, penetrating his head. This bloody scene made the faces of the remaining people turn pale. Dean slowly turned around, walked down the steps, and walked toward the people hiding in the corner of the hall. He stopped in front of an older man and said in a hoarse voice, "Has Dragon Mother been like this since she came back?" The old man looked at Dean in horror. His legs were trembling, and he said in a trembling voice, "Please, don't kill me. Answer me." Dean stared at him. The old man trembled and said hurriedly, "Dragon Mother's ice poison went deep into her bone marrow. In order to take back the god's corpse and kill the invaders, she didn't hesitate to stimulate the power of the ice poison. After she came back, she became like this. She didn't even have a chance to explain her funeral." Dean confirmed the idea in his heart. Dragon Mother's appearance was the same as when she fought with the invaders. Perhaps her body was irreparable when she was frozen to repel the invaders. That was why she maintained her demonized appearance even after she lost consciousness and life. It was because her frozen body made it impossible for her to remove the demonization. "Did you put her in the coffin to bury her? Did she die like this?" Dean asked. The old man's face was covered in cold sweat as he bowed his head. This, we don't know. Although such a situation has happened before, but the records are not clear. I only heard that if the ice poison breaks out, the whole body will freeze and all the body tissues will turn into ice cubes and lose consciousness. There is a possibility that the body will melt in a high-temperature environment. At that time, consciousness may be restored and life will come back. But this is just a hearsay. No one knows whether it is true or false. Is there a possibility of restoring consciousness? Dean couldn't help but turn his head to look at the scattered pieces of Dragon Mother under the coffin. He thought that even if her body was thawed, it would be useless. "You are a hero and a hero among women. At least you are much stronger than the others," Dean said in his heart. If he wasn't there, Dragon Mother would have used her life to repel the invaders and recapture the god's corpse. This story would be spread for hundreds of years and become a legend. However, if he won the power of the Wall Lord, then he was destined to erase this glorious record, and the name of the hero would be hung on his name. After all, he also needed a positive image, one that was praised and respected by people. Moreover, he was the one who killed the invaders, so it wasn't false. However, the real hero was covered up and turned into dust. He slowly disappeared in the river of time. When the power is big enough, you can cover the sky with one hand. It turns out that the sky that is covered isn't the sky that is high up in the sky, but the people. Dean had some feelings in his heart, but this feeling made him sigh. He didn't feel happy at all. Instead, he felt empty. He slowly turned around and dragged his exhausted body out of the hall step by step. Then he went along the hillside towards Aisha. Aisha was still quietly standing on the square. She was surrounded by a large number of ordinary guards, but they didn't dare to approach her. Some of them had recognized Aisha's identity, but repeatedly questioned her. Whoosh! Dean swept past like a hurricane. The crowd that surrounded Aisha was quickly torn apart. Blood splashed, and limbs fell to the ground. The rest of the guards saw the monster that suddenly appeared next to Aisha. They were scared and retreated a few steps. Their faces were aghast. It wasn't surprising that they were so surprised. Dean's demonized body image was too horrifying. In addition, his face and chest were burned. He was like a ghost that crawled out of hell. His appearance alone was enough to frighten everyone. Dean didn't pay attention to these ordinary guards. He held Aisha's waist and whispered, "Let's go back. I'll find a way to treat you soon." Aisha was silent and didn't respond. Chapter 787. Dean returned to the outer wall area after a few hours. He went straight to the second base. The second base was located in a secluded area in the western part of the commercial district. The Dark Believers had massacred several villages in this area, causing the area to become deserted. Now, Dean chose this place as the second base. It was a sparsely populated area. It was convenient for him to arrange wind power stations and solar panels. Moreover, it was not far from Utopo Mountain. Dean flew back to the second base. He saw Sergei, Gwyneth, Noyce, and others. In addition, Xiao Manson and Poland were busy in the laboratory. He slowly descended from the air. The sensors in the base lit up as they sensed his life fluctuations. The intelligence department immediately passed the news to Noyce. Noyce saw Dean descending from the sky when he received the news. He immediately went to greet him. "Master, you." Noyce was about to ask about Dean's situation, but he was stunned when he saw Dean's face. At this moment, Dean had removed the demonic body, but the high temperature of the dragon's breath had penetrated the demonic skin and burned the skin inside. So Dean's face looked extremely frightening. Half of his face was completely disfigured. In addition, his chest was also burned and covered with flesh and blood. The flesh and blood were slightly red, as if the blood had solidified in the rotten flesh. "Has Richelieu dealt with the explosion in Utopo Mountain?" Dean asked. Noyce hurriedly said, "He has dealt with it. He has temporarily controlled the situation and blocked the news. He has also asked the newspapers to report the scandals of other well-known figures and nobles. But this is only temporary. He is waiting for your reply. He wants to see how tomorrow's news will explain the explosion. Just say that it was a terrorist disaster caused by the dark cultists. But the cultists who caused the disaster have been brought to justice. Let Hawkeye catch a few refugees to act as terrorists and execute them in public." Dean casually said. It seemed that he was prepared for this as he walked towards the main hall. Noyce nodded. He had been following Dean for a long time, so he could guess some of Dean's thoughts. Obviously, it was the easiest way to let the Dark Believers take the blame, although it would inevitably bring a certain degree of panic to the general public. After all, the headquarters of the Holy Church was destroyed, but it would create a strong image of the Holy Church once again. "Master, your injury." There was a trace of worry in Noyce's eyes. He was more concerned about Dean and the movements of the inner wall. These were the key to the survival of all of them. Dean found a chair and sat down. He let out a sigh of relief as he took a rest in his own territory. Dean touched his face as he heard Noyce's words. His smooth skin was bumpy. A small part of his skin was abnormally smooth, but the shape was raised and the pores were melted. "It's nothing. Didn't I come back alive?" Dean's attitude was calm. There was no anger in his tone. "But your face, it's nothing. It's good if I can recover. If not, then it's just skin." Dean indifferently said, "It's a small matter as long as it doesn't affect combat effectiveness." Noyce's lips slightly moved, but in the end he smiled bitterly in his heart and no longer persuaded. If it was an ordinary person, even a powerful person would inevitably feel angry. After all, disfigurement was hard for most people to accept. This could be seen from those powerful women who were looking for beauty pills everywhere. Moreover, women weren't the only ones who needed beauty pills. "Give me some healing medicine," Dudian called out. Noyce nodded and immediately left. After a moment, he came back with a medicine box. He opened it and saw many bottles and jars neatly stacked inside. The effects covered various aspects. There were antidotes, hemostatic drugs, bone recovery drugs, and so on. There were also life-saving drugs that could make a dying person gasp for 2 breaths. But the effect of these drugs was only to make a person gasp for 2 breaths. Dean picked out a few bottles and opened them. He took the pills and potions one by one. He quietly closed his eyes and rested. Noyce saw that Dean was healing, so he silently retreated with the medicine box. Dean suddenly said, drive the chariot over and bring Haley to see me." Noyce was startled. He nodded and silently retreated. Half an hour later, an ancient chariot rolled over and stopped outside the main hall. 6 figures were tied to the ropes outside the chariot. Besides Ronan and Hero, there were also ordinary pioneers who were subdued by Dean. As for the magic scorpion war god and the monastery's elders, they were still resisting. Dean didn't have time to subdue them, so they were still in the dungeon without being tied to the chariot. "Go in," Noyce shouted. A figure with disheveled hair was pushed into the hall. Dean slowly opened his eyes and looked at the figure who was sitting on the ground. In just over a month, the embarrassed figure in front of him was completely different from the arrogant and proud Hathaway. He saw that her clothes were tattered and torn. Her clothes were stained with a strong masculine smell. Her chest and thighs were faintly discernible. She used to be neatly combed and sprayed with high-grade perfume, but at the moment she was scattered and full of the smell of dandruff and sebum. Hathaway seemed to have adapted to the dirty environment. She didn't mind the carpet and just sat there. She was too lazy to get up. She looked at Dean and sneered. "Do you want to see me beg for mercy in front of you? Unfortunately, unless you tie my hands and feet, pinch my face and force me to make such a posture, you will never see such a picture." Dean quietly looked down at her and said, "Today I went to your dragon clan." Haley was startled. She noticed the terrible burn marks on Dean's face and chest. Her face slightly changed. With Dean's strength, it was most likely the dragon clan's dragon breath that could burn him like this. This meant that Dean had fought with the patriarch or the dragon mother. In addition to her, only the 2 of them had the magic marks of the dragon clan. "It seems that you were lucky to escape. Now you know that my dragon clan isn't a place that people like you can step into, right?" Haley sneered. Dean quietly looked at her, said, "Dragon Mother is dead. Your father is also dead. Today, in addition to the pioneers in the wasteland, there are basically no pioneers in the Giant Wall. It can be said that your dragon clan has been abolished." Haley was stunned. "Take her away," Dean said to Noyce next to him. Haley responded and sneered. "Nonsense. If you say that you can deal with my father, I can believe it. But you want to deal with the Dragon Mother? The Dragon Mother is the previous saint of the Dragon Clan. She's outstanding and not worse than my sister. As early as 30 years ago, she was already an inner wasteland master." Dudian didn't say a word, as if he hadn't heard anything. Noyce dragged Hathaway out. "Nonsense. You want to deceive me? Ridiculous." Haley shouted. Her voice came from outside the hall. Dean quietly looked at the front and didn't respond. Chapter 788. Dean asked Noyce to bring the god's marrows when he returned to the hall. "Master, about the inner wall." Noyce took the god's marrow and retreated to the side as he asked cautiously. Dean poured the god's marrows into the syringe and injected it into his body. "The danger in the inner wall has been eliminated. The invaders have died in our hands. There won't be anyone blocking our way if there is no accident." He looked at Noyce. "Remember to block the news that we killed the invaders. We can't let the inner wall know about it. They won't dare to attack us as long as they don't know that the invaders are dead. This is the safest time for us. We will continue to follow the previous pace. Once my physique is further improved, we will be able to dominate the inner wall." Noyce was startled. There was an incredible look in his eyes. It seemed that they had the victory in their hands, but it was just a matter of time. However, he found that there was not much joy on Dean's face, and he could not help but feel nervous. Now his status was different, and his knowledge was broader. Although he knew that Dean would not deceive him, with his understanding of Dean, if it was necessary, this boy could deceive and use everyone around him. He didn't dare to think too much as he didn't want to expose his thoughts. He knew that Dean's observation ability was very good, so he respectfully retreated. Dean injected the god's marrow into his body. Although he had done this many times, but he felt strange every time he did it. Only the sick needed to be injected into the body. He wasn't sick, but he was doing the things that the sick would do. It made him feel that he was really sick. Moreover, it was not a light disease. As the saying goes, people often have a lot of emotions in times of great joy and sorrow. They would even reminisce about their lives. Dean's mood was neither happy nor sad at the moment. He knew that sooner or later he would dominate the inner wall. All the obstacles had been removed. He just needed time to push him to the supreme throne. He didn't feel the slightest joy in his heart as he thought about becoming the ruler of Sylvia's wall. He didn't feel the slightest joy in his heart. He felt that he had seen too many people. He had seen people from all walks of life. From humble orphans in slums to ordinary civilians, rich merchants, aristocrats who were banished to the outer wall to entertain themselves. He had seen the real nobles in the inner wall who were conferred titles by the kingdom of God. He had seen the patriarchs of the hunting families and the leaders of the monastery. After seeing so many of them, he realized that the difference between these people wasn't that great. He felt that perhaps he had seen through everything. It would be boring if you saw through everything. It would be separated if you saw through a person. It would be wearying if you saw through everyone. Dean felt that he belonged to the last category. He was somewhat tired of the world. Even when he was with people, he could see through their thoughts at a glance. He could even easily make others happy and cry. He also knew that some people were respectful to him, which made him happy. But to others, he might be arrogant and disgusting. Everyone has a good side and an ugly side. He had seen it all. Even such thoughts would fill his mind all the time. It made him feel bored. Sometimes he even felt that his thoughts were too extreme. Extreme could easily lead to destruction. But he felt that only extreme ways could be used to verify the truth of the world and tear apart the hypocrisy. He tried to give an example and succeeded in convincing himself. Wait until I find a way to restore you. We'll find a deserted place where only the two of us can live. What do you say? Dean looked at Aisha with tender and pitiful eyes. Occasionally, when he slept, he would fantasize about living with her on a golden beach. That kind of life was enough for him. He didn't want to pay attention to other people and things. It was too complicated, and he felt a little tired. Aisha didn't answer, but in Dean's eyes, it was a tacit agreement. He smiled and gently held her hand. The longer the time, the stronger I will be. I believe that it won't be long before I can see what kind of secrets are hidden in the giant wall. The next day, Dean called Noyce and asked him to gather a group of loyal people from the dark church. Noyce took the order. 2 days later, a group of 50 people was gathered. All of them were selected by Noyce. The previous intruder stole the god's corpse from the inner wall. The 6 of them didn't bring the god's corpse when they fought with the inner wall. It should be hidden somewhere. Take some people to search and start from the outer wall. Dudian said. Noyce suddenly woke up and curiously asked, Master, what is the use of the god's corpse? It's worth for them to come all the way to snatch it. It's like finding a needle in a haystack compared to the area of the giant wall. The possibility of finding it should be very low. They won't hide too far because they have worked hard to get it. I also want to know what the use of the god's corpse is. But from the current situation, the god's corpse should still be in the giant wall. Dudian said, remember to make them move in stealth. Don't expose them. I know. Noyce didn't ask anymore and nodded. Time flew by. 1.5 months passed in the blink of an eye. The drizzle moistened the earth. The whole base was shrouded in drizzle. Dean quietly looked at the dark clouds outside the window. He could almost see the hidden lightning snakes in the clouds. After a long time, the rain gradually stopped. He slowly got up and looked at Aisha. You have a good rest here. I'm going to the inner wall. I believe I'll be back soon. Aisha's pure black eyes seemed to be staring at a certain point in the air. She didn't respond. Dean smiled and turned away. Noyce was waiting for him at the entrance of the hall. Master, your chariot is ready. Do you really want to go to the inner wall alone? Chapter 789. Dean's feet moved slightly. It was as if there was a force behind him that sent him to the chariot. He stood in the back of the chariot and said in a low voice, Go to the inner wall, full speed. Hero, Ronan, and the others, who were tied to the side of the chariot, heard the order. They raised their heads and revealed a pair of gloomy eyes through their messy hair. They aimed in a certain direction, and with Hero and Ronan in the lead, they pulled the chariot forward. The others pulled the chariot from the side and ran forward in a fan shape. The chains clanked, and the chariot's wheels moved under their pull. Soon, the chariot rushed out of the base and came to the wasteland. All the way forward, they met a shallow stream. They directly crossed it and hit the water like 12 angry beasts. Their expressions were numb. They were like puppets. Their willpower had long been weak under the erosion of the poison pin. They obediently followed such treatment without dignity. They met a mountain and crossed it. They met a dense forest and broke through it. Dean stood on the chariot with his sword. His eyes passed through the rainy sky and looked straight at the wall that was gradually revealed in front of him. The area near the wall that was destroyed by the gunpowder had been surrounded and blocked by the Knights of Light. During this time, many nobles had secretly visited the Holy Church and sent a lot of valuable gifts. They wanted to gain accommodation and let them sneak into the inner wall. But most of them were rejected. Dean didn't enter from the gap. Now, it was the focus of the whole commercial district. All the forces had sent their eyes to observe it. He didn't want to cause any trouble, so he let Hero and others pull the chariot directly from another direction. When they arrived in front of the wall, the elders of the monastery and the other pioneers immediately spread their wings. Some of them used their crawling ability to pull the chariot directly to the wall. The others flew in the air and used the chains to pull the chariot. The others, who didn't have the ability to climb over the high wall, grabbed the chains and fished behind the chariot. Under the joint efforts of the pioneers, the steep wall of size was easily crossed as if they were walking on flat ground, and their speed was not reduced at all. "Go to King's City," Dean ordered. Hearing this, a few of them trembled slightly, as if they knew something, but they lowered their heads and continued to pull the carts. The chariot sped through the wasteland, occasionally encountering one or two wandering corpses. Hero and Ronan, who were in charge of the main direction, casually killed them. Along the way, they passed by the borders of several cities, directly passing through the front of King's City. It seems that the invaders haven't been eliminated and the god corpses haven't been retrieved. They don't even have the mood to pacify the corpses. Dean noticed that there were troops in several cities along the way, but the number was small. The broken fortresses were not repaired. It was a mess. "Go to the palace and kill anyone who blocks the way," Dudian said in a cold voice. Everyone hesitated as they heard Dean's words. But Hero and Ronan, who were at the front, pulled the chariot again after a short moment of hesitation. The others had to keep up with them. The chariot charged towards the city gate. The people lining up in front of the city gate were all stunned when they saw the chariots whizzing past. Especially when they saw that the people pulling the chariots were actually people, they felt that it was even more inconceivable. They immediately retreated to the side. In their impression, only nobles with high status could make such a scene. "Stop! Stop! Who are you? Stop!" The guards of the city gate were surprised to see the chariot rushing towards them. But they saw that there was no family flag on the chariot, so they bit the bullet in order to stop. The chariot didn't have the slightest intention to slow down. The guards were shocked as they saw the chariot. They held their weapons and stood in front of the city gate. The next moment, Hero and Ronan, who were at the very front, quickly attacked and sent the guards flying. Some of the guards were struck in the chest by a single palm strike, and their entire chest armor caved in. Their bones and hearts were shattered. "Stop! Don't! Someone is trying to break in. Stop them!" The guard behind the city gate were shocked and scared when they saw Dean and the others rushing towards them. Some of them sounded the alarm. Dean looked indifferent and didn't respond. He looked straight ahead. The chariot sped all the way, killing or repelling the guards in front of it. The guards were as fragile as paper in front of the 12 pioneers. The chariot quickly rushed into the king's city and sped along the street. The pedestrians on the road were shocked and gave way. There were nobles who were riding carriages in the middle of the road, observing the scenery of the shops on the side of the road. They couldn't dodge in time. Hero lifted the carriage with one hand and threw it several meters high. It fell on the side of the road and smashed into pieces. No one knew if the people inside were dead or alive. The chariot swept away all the clouds in its path. No one was spared. Dean stood firmly with the sword in his hand. The structure of the chariot was very strong. The body of the chariot bounced when it ran over the bodies of some passers-by, but it didn't suffer any damage. The scenery of the streets of the king's city quickly passed by Dean's eyes. The screams of the pedestrians and the shocked faces of some nobles were also passed by the chariot. He saw many scenes that he hadn't seen in the outer wall, but he wasn't in the mood to appreciate them. He squinted his eyes and concentrated, waiting for the battle that was coming soon. Half an hour later, the chariot rushed to the front of the palace. A large number of powerful guards gathered at the bottom of the steps in front of the palace. They were all emitters. They seemed to have received the news long ago and had set up a military formation here in advance. When the chariot arrived, a few figures came out from the steps of the palace and looked down at Dean on the chariot. Standing in the center was Yulida. Next to her was a military commander, Yamos. Originally, there were 3 commanders, but now he was the only one left. The other 2 had died in the battle at the Pagel Mountains, and the other had died in the ambush at King City. In addition to Yamos, there were 4 or 5 generals. All of them had powerful auras and were pioneers. Dean, do you have to choose this time to attack my king's city and seize my royal power? Yulida jumped down. Her figure was light. She passed 1,000 steps in the blink of an eye and arrived at the height of the 30th step. Looking at Dean, who was exuding a majestic aura on the chariot, there was a trace of fear in the depths of her eyes. Compared to last time, she felt that Dean's temperament had changed. He was stronger, more restrained, and more composed than before. Chapter 790. Eureka's cheeks turned red. What nonsense are you talking about? At this time, Yamos and other generals rushed to Eureka's side. Yamos saw the 12 figures tied to Dean's chariot. His face changed as he exclaimed, "Hero, Ronan!" Hero and Ronan, who were in front of the chariot, trembled as they heard Yamos's call. They lowered their heads even more. Eureka reacted as the blush on her face faded away. She looked at the figure tied to the chariot. There was a trace of fear in her eyes. "Dean, what did you do to them? Were you the one who broke into the Dragon Clan a month and a half ago? Do you know that the invaders could come back at any time without Dragon Mother? Do you think you could get the royal power by colluding with the invaders? You are seeking your own destruction. Dragon Mother has frozen and died. What can she do if the invaders come back?" Dean looked indifferent as his words were tantamount to admitting it. Eureka knew that it was Dean, but she couldn't help but feel great anger in her heart when she heard him admit it. She gritted her teeth. "You are worse than a pig or a dog. Do you know that the invaders have stolen the god's corpse? Without the god's corpse, we will all be destroyed. Even if you get the supreme power, you will still die. Do you think you are smart? You are too stupid." Dean was indifferent and didn't speak. Seeing his expression, Eureka became even more furious. She said angrily, "Although Dragon Mother was frozen, it was only temporary. I have something from the divine nation that can help her break the ice and revive her. But you killed her and destroyed her body. She can't be resurrected anymore. When the invaders come, you and I will die in their hands. Even if they don't kill you, you will still die if they take the god's corpse. Don't scare me. What does it have to do with my life if they take the god's corpse?" Dean didn't believe it. Eureka gritted her teeth. "Why do you think those horrible things in the abyss haven't wandered to the giant wall? Do you think they are relying on the devil family to defend the wasteland? They're scarecrows in front of those horrible things. If there is no Sylvia god of war's corpse guarding the giant wall, then sooner or later these things will come to the giant wall. With our population here in front of them, it is simply a big meal. Even if my father comes back, he may not be able to protect everyone." Dean was startled. Although he expected a catastrophe when the god's corpse left the giant wall, he didn't think it would lead to the abyss. No wonder they valued the god's corpse so much. Eureka looked at Dean's dazed expression. She was angry that Dean didn't live up to her expectations. She wouldn't have publicly revealed such a secret if they hadn't lost the god's corpse. But she knew that even if she revealed it, it was a foregone conclusion. Dragon Mother was dead. This was something that couldn't be changed. Dean didn't know this in advance. He colluded with the invaders and killed Dragon Mother. He completely ruined their hope. It was so stupid that Eureka hated him to the point of powerlessness. It seems that my guess is right. The god's corpse is still in the giant wall. Dudian thought in his heart. 1.5 months had passed, but there were no monsters attacking the giant wall. It meant that the immortal's corpse was still here. Unfortunately, the people he had sent hadn't found the whereabouts of the immortal's corpse. The place where the invaders hid the immortal's corpse was a bit remote. However, once he took control of the inner wall, he would send pioneers who were good at perception to search. He should be able to find it soon. "Bastard, get off the carriage and die," Yamo shouted at Dean. When he called Hero and Ronan, they didn't answer him. He knew that most of them were controlled by Dean. This made him angry. Hero used to be his subordinate. He watched him grow step by step to become the god of war. He didn't expect that Hero would end up in such a miserable situation and become a coachman. Dean glanced at him and wanted to say something. However, he suddenly thought that it was not convincing to ask them to surrender now. After all, they had to suffer before they were willing to admit defeat. He immediately stopped talking. He was too lazy to waste his breath. He drove the chariot, shouted, and rushed toward Yulida and Yamos. Seeing that Dean directly attacked, Hero, Ronan, and the other pioneers pulled the chariot and rushed over. Yamos, Yulida, and the other generals were slightly startled. They felt a chill and sadness in their hearts. Yamos's eyes were slightly red. He roared and stimulated his demon body. He took the lead and jumped toward Dean on the chariot. Dean didn't use the iron chain protection net on the chariot. He could only use the life and death of Hero and the others to restrain them. However, the purpose of his trip was to flatten this place. He stood on the chariot. The splitter in his hand quickly melted and flowed into his body. The terrifying and ferocious demon body appeared. Compared to the demon body when he was a pioneer, the current demon body looked more ferocious and complete. Even his face was covered with a hard carapace. If there was a mirror, Dean could see that his eyes were no longer the black and white eyes of a human. Instead, the whites of his eyes had turned black, and the eyeballs had turned into strange yellow eyes. After entering the demon body, the things that Dean saw were completely different from before. His field of vision was always maximized, and he could see through everything at any time. Even Yamos, who was flying over, could see the flesh, bones, and blood vessels in his body. He could also see the thumping of his heart. He felt that his thoughts had become unprecedentedly clear, fast, and calm. There was only the consciousness of hunting and killing left in his heart. Under this consciousness, he could see the flaw revealed by Yamos at a glance. This flaw was not revealed on the surface of his body, but on a bone under his armpit. This bone was the weakest joint of his whole body. There were only 2 small bones as a support, indicating that this was the weakest place to exert force. Go to hell. Yamos's demon body was like a crocodile and a lizard. He roared and swung his claws toward Dean's head. The sharp blade-like limbs on Dean's shoulder seemed to be attracted by a magnet. They stood erect. The ferocious and sharp blades reflected the cold luster, not the slightest bit afraid of the claws. At the same time, a blade-like limb suddenly shot out from Dean's back. The moment the two approached, it stabbed toward Yamo's armpit. The surface was covered with cyan scales, which were extremely tough and harder than most steel armors. Because of this, when Yamo saw Dean's terrifying demon body shape, he still dared to pounce. But the moment the blade-like limb stabbed out, Yamos felt an alert crisis. He wanted to turn his body, but it was too late. The next moment, a sharp pain came from his armpit straight into his bone marrow. Chapter 791. Dean was waiting for Yamos to get close to him. How could he let Yamos get away so easily? He immediately pounced forward. His whole body was covered with sharp blades, blocking Yamos' retreat. The sharp blades in front of his chest suddenly pierced out like several slender daggers. Yamos was shocked. He roared and stamped his foot. With a bang, the beam under his foot broke. His body shrank down, dodging Dean's embrace. He drilled under the chariot and rushed out from behind the wheels. The group of pioneers tied around the chariot only pulled the chariot. They did not attack Yamos. Dean did not expect them to work for him wholeheartedly. With a tap of his toes, he soared up and rushed back to Yamos. His magic wings flapped like a black magic bird. How is this possible? Yulida's face was full of shock. Yamos was seriously injured in just one encounter and fell into a disadvantageous position. On the other hand, Dean's momentum was like a tiger. He chased after Yamos and completely suppressed him. She found it hard to believe. It must be known that Yamos was a famous inner wilderness powerhouse for many years. There were very few people who could defeat him. Apart from the former state master, there were only the three family members who had retired behind the scenes: Dragon Mother, Rock Demon, and others. When Dean attacked, she noticed that the heat in Dean's body had soared to the inner wilderness level. But she did not expect that Yamos, who was also in the inner wilderness, could not deal with such a newcomer. Whoosh! She did not dare to continue watching the battle. She immediately swooped down and shouted, "Stop!" Dean did not look back. His eyes locked on Yamos and rushed out at full speed. With the help of the magic wings, he approached Yamos in the blink of an eye. Yamos's demonized body was relatively sturdy, but his movements were slightly clumsy compared to Dean's. He felt the sound of the wind breaking behind him and turned around in horror. He hurriedly swept his tail and lashed at Dean. Dean waved his scythe arm to cut. Puff! Puff! The tail of Yamos was cut off on the spot, but Dean didn't feel good either. Yamos' tail was tougher than he had imagined. His arm was numb, but he couldn't miss the opportunity. He endured the pain in his arm and suddenly rushed out. The sharp blades on his body rolled up like a whirlwind of blades. He quickly approached Yamos' body. Yamos' pupils constricted. He waved his hand in shock, and a cone-shaped demon hunting tool appeared in his palm. Puff, puff, puff. Blood splattered everywhere, and chunks of flesh of all sizes splattered all over the ground. Whoosh! Dean's body swept past Yamos and stopped in front of his escape route. He turned around and saw that Yulida had displayed the strange shape of a civet and was rushing over. The ground in front of his feet was scattered with pieces of flesh and broken hands. There were almost no complete corpses. There was also half of Yamos' head. His eyeballs were close to the ground, wide open. Dean licked the bloodstains on his lips. A warm, rusty taste was emitted from the tip of his tongue. His eyes flashed with excitement and bloodthirstiness. He didn't expect that the previously unrivaled powerhouse of the inner wilderness would be so fragile. Or it could be said that the current him was stronger than he had imagined. This made him unprecedentedly confident and heroic. Yulida looked at the scattered pieces of flesh in front of Dean's feet. A trace of shock flashed on her hairy face. Her speed of pouncing toward Dean suddenly slowed down. She wanted to rush over and help Yamos to kill Dean. But she didn't expect that Yamos wouldn't be able to hold on for such a short distance. A master of the inner wilderness who had been famous for many years actually died like this. He died so quickly, as if he was facing a dominator. Dean lifted his foot and stepped over the minced flesh of Yamos' body. His eyes flashed with a dark, evil intent as he softly said, "Princess, it seems that you have seen the situation clearly. If you surrender to me, I can let you keep your life. At least I can keep you until your father comes back. How about it?" Yulida sobered up. Her face sank as she heard Dean's words. She coldly said, "Don't talk nonsense. It's not your turn to spare my life. You want to keep me alive because you want to wait for my father to come back. Then you can use me as a hostage to threaten my father. Let me tell you, you think too much. What am I compared to the entire giant wall? My father will kill you on the spot as a blood sacrifice for my soul. You're wrong about me." Dean approached her step by step. "There are only two possibilities if I use you as a hostage. Either your father will give in and let me live, or he will let me kill you. Then he will kill me to avenge you. No matter which outcome it is, there is a risk. So I can leave here before your father comes back. The existence of the invaders proves that this world isn't only in this giant wall. I can go to other giant walls to live." Yulida slightly sneered. "Then you go. Do you think that I don't have a way to cross the abyss? Dean slowly said, I didn't have a way at first, but after the appearance of the invaders, I found one. Yulida was startled. She suddenly got the answer in her mind. So you colluded with the invaders. They helped you to get the kingship and told you the way to cross the abyss. You helped them to take away the god's corpse. So when they leave and my father comes back, you will have a way out. No wonder you are not afraid of abandoning the god's corpse. Your Highness, Dean spoke again. It seemed that he wanted to say something, but he only said these two words. His figure suddenly rushed forward. Unknowingly, he was about 10 meters away from Yulida. The distance of 10 meters was like a step. He crossed it in an instant. Whoosh, whoosh. Dean's sharp limbs rolled up, turning into countless afterimages as they shot out at high speed. Eureka stood there without moving. When the afterimage passed by, her figure slowly dissipated like smoke. The next moment, she appeared 20 meters away. Her furry little face was full of mockery. You think I wouldn't notice such a small move? You used to kill people with this kind of petty cleverness and cunning? Dean knew that the sneak attack had failed. He was surprised. The last time he saw Yulida attack the intruder, he was surprised. He didn't expect her reaction speed to be faster than he imagined. It was like an electric reaction. Hearing her mockery, he slightly raised his eyebrows, tilted his head, and coldly looked at her, saying, Then I'll show you how smart I am. He turned and rushed towards the guards in front of the steps. Yulida was surprised as she saw where Dean was going. Her face showed anger. If you have the ability, then come at me. Dean rushed towards the guards in front of the steps as if he didn't hear her. Chapter 792. Eureka looked at the royal guards being cut down like grass in front of Dean. She couldn't bear it anymore. Her figure rushed out as fast as a phantom. She approached Dean's back. Sharp claws appeared on her fingers as she tried to tear Dean's nape. Dean seemed to have eyes on his back. When she approached, the sharp limbs on his back quickly rolled up and stabbed at her. The length of the strange limbs was more than 2 meters, immediately forcing Yulida to retreat. Dean ignored her and continued to rush to the guards. Yulida looked at the familiar faces being quickly torn apart in front of Dean. Warm blood gushed out of their bodies one by one. Among them were the guards who had greeted her in the past. She even knew that the wives of some of the guards were pregnant. Soon, the children would be born in this world. However, the sharp blades on Dean's body were mercilessly waving, quickly beheading them. Almost none of the corpses were intact. She was trembling with anger. She clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. She was both angry and helpless. Although she could escape Dean's attack, she couldn't get close to Dean. She could only watch him massacre the guards. He's just a pariah in the outer wall. How could he have the splitter magic mark? Moreover, looking at the changes, it is even more powerful than the National Master's magic mark. Is it the deified splitter magic mark? How could he get such a thing? Damn it! Yulida was standing behind Dean. Screams were echoing in her ears. The slaughterhouse was like purgatory on earth. The well-trained royal guards were like golden wheat in a wheat field in front of Dean. They were quickly harvested by the death scythe. Kill. Don't be afraid. The one who retreats will die. Behind the royal guards, several pioneers roared angrily. 3 of them were military gods. They were so angry that their eyes almost popped out. They stimulated the magic body and roared as they rushed toward Dean. Dean's strange magic eyes slightly turned. He glanced at the 3 pioneers who rushed toward him. One of the pioneers was covered with green scales and weird lumps. As he approached Dean, he suddenly ejected a stream of green mucus from his throat, exuding a stinky smell. Dean recognized his body. It was a rare monster called Green Devil. It was a highly toxic monster. Dean was well prepared. He stabbed the chest of a nearby guard with his sharp limbs and threw the guard towards venom. The venom fell on the back of the guard. Dean flapped his wings and rushed at full speed. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of the pioneer. Poo-pee-you. The pioneer widened his eyes. He didn't have time to retreat. His body was cut into pieces, and he died instantly. Dean turned to kill the other 2. The other 2 military gods weren't afraid as they saw Dean's monstrous demonic power. They roared and rushed towards him. Dean was like a killing machine. The stairs under his feet were like flat ground. He quickly cut in front of the two. Waving his sharp blade, he pierced the chest of one of the military gods almost without any hindrance. The sharp blade twisted slightly and quickly tore the body of the military god apart. Eureka found an opportunity and immediately attacked Dean's back. Just as her demonic claws were about to hit the back of Dean's neck, several strange blade-like limbs stretched out from Dean's armpits and went to his back, stabbing Eureka's throat and face. Eureka's pupils shrank. She stamped her feet and stopped her body instantly. She retreated. Her whole body was covered with a layer of cold sweat. Previously, when she saw the strange blade-like limbs on Dean's back attacking, she thought that Dean didn't have enough time to defend. She didn't expect that the strange blade-like limbs on his chest could go to his back for protection. It seemed that he could use the strange blade-like limbs on his chest to kill the enemy, but he deliberately exposed this flaw to draw her close. Thinking of this, she was furious, but she didn't dare to act rashly. At the moment when she stopped, Dean had already beheaded the 3 military gods. Surrounded by layers of royal guards, his terrifying and ferocious demonic body was like a demon from hell. No one could stop him. I don't believe that I can't kill him alone. I can only take a step back and ask the Monster Research Institute and Wing family for help. Eureka looked at the guards that continued to fall under Dean's feet. Her eyes were red and she clenched her fists. She felt that she had never suffered such humiliation in her life. These loyal guards in front of her, she could only watch them die one after another, and she could only escape. At this moment, she even felt that if time could be reversed, she would even give up the opportunity to kill the invaders and kill Dean in the last meeting. Whoosh! Eureka didn't look anymore. She gritted her teeth and turned away quickly. Dean's magic eyes slightly turned and glanced at Eureka's back. He felt some regret in his heart. He couldn't catch Eureka. He had never seen the latter's magic mark form before. It should not belong to any of the monsters in the Atlas. Most likely, it was her father, the Wall Lord, who found high-level magic marks from the God's Kingdom. Her speed was completely beyond his. It was almost impossible to catch her unless he broke through to the Dominator level. He wanted to use the death of these guards to irritate her and make her lose her mind. He wanted to take the initiative to attack him, but he didn't expect that she would hold back. He regretted that he couldn't catch Eureka. It would make it more time-consuming for him to control the inner wall. Your Highness has abandoned you. Those who surrender will live, and those who resist will die. Dean took back his gaze and roared at the guards in front of him. His voice rumbled and spread throughout the audience. It shook the eardrums of the people who were a little bit closer to him. Hearing Dean's words, the guards who were standing at the back suddenly sobered up. They looked up and saw Eulida's figure a kilometer away. For a time, many people looked at each other in dismay. There was a sense of powerlessness and frustration. Many of the guards gritted their teeth and threw away their weapons. But there were still some guards roaring and continuing to attack Dean. The battle ended after a few minutes, or it could be said that the massacre was over. There was a river of blood on the stairs leading to the palace, which was the symbol of supreme power. Countless corpses and limbs were scattered on the ground. The bloody scene was shocking. Hundreds of guards were standing next to the stairs. They had chosen to surrender. Dean had kept their lives. They looked at the corpses of their companions on the stairs. Their faces were pale, and their hearts were filled with sadness. Those who obey will live, and those who resist will die. From today onwards, I'm the Wall Lord of Sylvia. Those who surrender to me will be promoted to nobility. Those who resist will be killed without mercy. Dean stood on the stairs. His terrifying demonic body exuded an intimidating aura. His voice was so loud that it spread throughout the palace. Although his words were a bit stupid, but he knew that he had to say it. This was his attitude, so that all the attendants in the palace, the guards, and the civil officials in the cabinet would know what he meant. Moreover, this sentence meant that the era of Eulida's reign no longer existed. Moreover, all those who supported Eulida would be labeled as traitors. The winner was the king, and the loser was the thief. It was perfectly reflected at this moment. Chapter 793. Dean stepped into the palace and walked on the gorgeous red carpet to the top throne and sat down. There were many attendants and maids standing in the hall. All of them lowered their heads and secretly looked at Dean. Their eyes were full of fear. Dean glanced at them and waved to a young attendant with a baby face not far away. Who is in charge of the palace when Yulida is not here? The young attendant's body trembled. He symbolically moved a small step forward and stammered, "Yes, sir. When Her Highness is not here, it is the National Master who is in charge of the palace." National Master? Isn't he dead? Who is the new National Master? Is he here? Yes, he is. Go and call him over. The young attendant's face was pale. He secretly looked at a young man in a dark golden robe. The young man was standing with several attendants. When he heard Dean mention the National Master, his face turned ugly. At this moment, he knew that he couldn't escape. He simply took the initiative to stand up and salute to Dean. "Sir, I am the new National Master. You can call me Saul." Dean glanced at him. The heat reaction in his body was that of a limitless being, but it did not rule out that he had controlled the heat fluctuations. After all, the former National Master was a powerhouse in the inner wilderness, so the new National Master should be a pioneer. His voice was flat and unpredictable. He said, "When they besieged me, I didn't see you make a move. Is this a betrayal?" Saul's face slightly changed. He didn't expect that Dean would investigate him for Yulida without asking anything else. He quickly guessed Dean's thoughts and said with a wry smile, "Sir, it's not that I didn't make a move, but I knew that my strength was low. If I rashly made a move, I would be at your mercy. I was looking for your flaws, but before I could find them, you killed them and Her Highness had to escape." Dean knew that this person had a high EQ. He said, "There's a saying that a wise man submits to circumstances. It means that the person who can see the situation and adapt to the situation is a hero. Are you going to continue to be loyal to Yulida, or will you submit to me?" The original meaning of this sentence was naturally not like this, but he could twist it to express his own meaning. Saul knew that he had no choice. He knew that the outcome of the battle had been decided when Yulida was forced to retreat several times. He pretended to hesitate, but only hesitated for a moment. "I'm willing to be loyal to you." Saul gritted his teeth and said, "Elder is right. I'm willing to be loyal to you." "In that case, come up." Saul was startled. There was some hesitation in his heart, but he knew that it would be easy for Dean to kill him. So he boldly stepped forward. Dean stood up and gave up the throne. "You sit down." Saul's face slightly changed. Only the wall leader in Yulida had sat on this throne. Although he was the National Master, but sitting on this throne was tantamount to treason. He immediately understood the meaning of Dean's words. Once he sat down, there would be no turning back. If he didn't sit down, then he would lose his head. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw that many guards and maids were looking at him. Among them, there were even a few cabinet ministers who were discussing in the palace. Once he sat down, although he was being coerced, if word got out, it would be hard to clear his name. This made him very hesitant. He really did not expect this loyalty test to come so quickly and so ruthlessly. "What? Don't dare to sit?" Dean looked at him as if he could see the depths of Saul's soul. Saul squeezed out a smile. "Elder, this is your throne. Isn't it a bit inappropriate for me to sit on it?" "What's inappropriate about it? Since you have pledged allegiance to me, then why can't you do such a small thing?" There was a trace of coldness in Dean's eyes. Saul looked at Dean's strange eyes. He felt like he was being stared at by a viper. He bit the bullet and said, "Since you have said so, then I have to sit." Then he slowly sat down. Dean nodded slightly. "How do you feel?" Saul smiled bitterly in his heart, thinking that it would be more comfortable for him to sit on a hot iron plate. He said in a low voice, "This throne is too honorable. It's not something a person of my status should sit on. It's better for my lord to sit on it." After saying that, he stood up and moved aside. Dean didn't ask him to continue to sit on the throne. He knew what Saul was worried about. Although he had repelled Yulida and was unstoppable in the inner wall, but there were still two major factors that could make him fall from the throne. The first factor was the joint siege of the Monster Research Institute and the Hunter family. The second factor was the return of the Wall Leader. Dean knew that the second factor would be the last hope in everyone's heart. However, no one knew when the Wall Leader would come back. If he came back now, then he would have to escape to the outside of the giant wall. But if he came back late, then he would have the capital to negotiate with the God's corpse. If he was given more time, then the scale of the power station he would build would increase. Even if the Wall Leader came back, he believed that he would be able to kill him. Dean needed to forcibly control the entire inner wall. No matter what kind of hope they had, he had to use his power to suppress it. Send people to block the news here. Also inform the most authoritative newspaper that Yulida is wanted in the city. She is accused of colluding with the invaders, causing corpses and squeezing the money of civilians. Dean said to Saul. Saul was dumbfounded when he heard that. He was secretly speechless. A warrant for Yulida? She was the only princess of Sylvia. How could she become a wanted criminal in the blink of an eye? Moreover, the accusation was simply false and maliciously imposed. What? Can't you do it? Saul came back to his senses. I can do it. Most of the reason why Yulida ran away is to contact the Monster Research Institute and the Witcher family. She is ready to make a comeback. But after the battle with the invaders, their remaining strength can't compete with me. Send a letter to them. Tell them that whoever helps Yulida will be treated as a traitor. Cut off all transactions with them. Anyone who has dealings with them will be punished with the same crime. Dudian coldly said. Saul was startled and said, Sir, even if I send a letter to them, they may not listen to me. After all, Princess Eureka is a princess and the only daughter of the Wall Master. They will definitely help her. I know, Dean said, but the letter still has to be sent. Saul looked at him. He felt a trace of strangeness in his heart. Wouldn't they be able to see through Dean's intentions? Wouldn't they want to separate them one by one and defeat them one by one? Wouldn't it be tantamount to helping Yulida to push their alliance? Forcing them to join forces to encircle you as soon as possible. Chapter 794. Whoosh! Eureka ran at full speed, passing by the roofs of the buildings on the streets like a white phantom. A moment later, she rushed out of Royal City, and the vast wasteland came into view. She could still hear the mournful screams lingering in her ears. The image of blood splattering appeared in her mind, and she could not get it out of her mind. She bit her lip lightly. She had never thought that she would be in such a humiliating and embarrassing situation, like a stray dog. After flying out of the royal city, she went straight to the territory of the Winged Demon clan. Although the territory of the Dragon clan was closest to the royal city, the Dragon clan had no combat power. It was the same for the territory of the Rock clan. The Rock Demon, the only master of the Rock clan in the inner wilderness, had died in the war with the invaders. Although there were 7 or 8 pioneers left, after seeing Dean's magic, she knew that ordinary pioneers were no longer a threat to him, unless they had some magic marks with special abilities. But among all the magic marks, most of them were mainly for close combat, either for attack or defense. These two categories included all kinds of strange attacks, and there were countless defensive abilities. There were fat types, scaly types, bone types, and so on. Find Wing King, together with the stone-clawed dragon serpent in the headquarters of the Monster Research Institute. We should be able to kill him. Wing King can attack from a distance, while the stone-clawed dragon serpent will block him from the front. I'll interfere from the side. Although his magic marks are terrifying, his defense is weak. As long as he is injured, he will slowly weaken and die. Eureka secretly planned a revenge counterattack in her heart. Fortunately, although Dean was strong, he was not as tyrannical as the invader. Although he could rely on the magic marks of the splitter to look down on the other masters in the inner wilderness, the remaining forces here could not be underestimated. Then find the dean of the monastery and the remaining top masters in the outer wilderness to control him from a distance. If we attack together, he will die without a doubt. Eureka's eyes flashed. Thinking of this, the anger in her heart suddenly found a vent. She sneered, but the next moment, her body suddenly stiffened and stopped in place. Her face became extremely ugly. When she thought of the group attack, she suddenly remembered that Dean was not alone. Behind him, there was a dragon Saint Aisha who had turned into a corpse. Moreover, Dean had said that Aisha had awakened for the 5th time. It seemed that the Dragon Clan wasn't surprised by the news. Most of it was true. Furthermore, she also knew that after the members of the Chi Demon Clan turned into corpses, their bloodline would naturally awaken. It would awaken every once in a while. Sooner or later, Aisha would reach the 7th degree of awakening. Once it awakened 7 times, it would be equivalent to the level of an abyssal walker. In fact, it would be even more ferocious than an ordinary abyssal walker. Aisha, who has awakened 5 times, is equivalent to an inner Baron level master. Moreover, she is more powerful than an ordinary inner Baron level master. She is at the level of Dragon Mother, Wing King, and Rock Demon. He has Aisha to help him, but Her face was pale. She didn't dare to continue thinking about it, because the answer had already appeared in her mind. Although she didn't want to admit this cruel fact, but the fact was in front of her. She had to admit it. Dragon Mother was frozen and died in the battle with the invaders. Most of the other masters were killed or injured. At this time, he jumped out and attacked the palace. It turned out that everything was calculated. He knew that we had no trump card. Eureka muttered to herself. She looked at the vast wilderness. Suddenly, she felt that there was no place for her in this big world. She was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. At this moment, she also complained about the unfairness of fate. Dean's luck was too good. The appearance of the invaders helped him exhaust their combat power. This led to him being born in the outer wall. But he had set foot on the supreme throne of the wall. It was like an earthworm in a stinky ditch had suddenly turned into a noble and gorgeous god. After standing for a long time, Eureka slowly recovered. The frustration, loss, and sadness in her eyes slowly converged. Her thoughts turned repeatedly. Finally, she rushed forward again. She thought of the words her father extracted from an old book. If you don't know what to do, then move forward. Run forward. She continued to move forward. Her heart slowly filled with confidence again. Although she had no chance of winning based on the combat power of both sides, the battlefield was ever-changing. The military commander Yamos once told her when she was young that war was different from numbers. Although both sides competed with a number of soldiers, equipment, comprehensive combat power, etc., the number was 1 minus 1, which was equal to 0. But war was 1 minus 1, which was equal to 1, and sometimes it was equal to 2. Since a frontal attack was not possible, then an ambush, a sneak attack. Eureka clenched her fists. No matter what, she had to take back her home. An hour later, Eureka came to the territory of the Wing family. She had been here before, so the guards were scared when they saw her. They immediately saluted. Eureka looked at the people living in the Wing family's territory. It was still a peaceful atmosphere, as though they were completely unaware of the changes in Royal City. She sighed in her heart. Her father said that although the Wing family was unruly, they were most loyal to the royal family. From this point alone, it could be seen that the intelligence network that the Wing family had set in Royal City was too weak. Your Highness, why do you have the time to come here to play? In the Wing family's main hall, the skinny old man sitting at the top was the Wing King. He looked at Eureka trotting into the main hall, and the gentle smile in his eyes gradually disappeared. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. Your Highness, did something happen? Did the invaders appear again? Eureka glanced at the few Wing family elders sitting beside her. Without hesitation, she immediately said to the Wing King, Uncle Wing King, I'm not here to see you about the invaders. Do you still remember the matter of the crusade against the invaders in the last meeting? In the meeting, there was a person called Dean. He just attacked my palace and killed Commander Yamos. He wants to occupy a royal city, proclaim himself king, and become the Wall Lord. The Winged King was slightly startled. His eyes widened, and he said in surprise, "Him? I have an impression of him, but he is just an outer wasteland pioneer. How could he fight with Commander Yamos? Did he sneak attack you?" Eureka's expression was calm. She shook her head and said, "He attacked us head-on. After not seeing him for a month and a half, he has already made a breakthrough and became an inner wasteland master like us. Moreover, his magic mark is the legendary splitter. Its shape is somewhat different from the State Master's. I suspect that his magic mark might even be the deified splitter's magic mark." The Winged King was stunned. Among the legendary demonic creatures, Splitter was even more powerful than their winged race's Bat Chimer. Only the dragon race's demonic dragon could firmly suppress it. He couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, are you sure? Not only does he have the Splitter's magic mark, but he is also deified?" "I'm basically sure," Eureka replied in a serious manner. "His physique is slightly higher than the average inner wasteland master. Although it's not as good as the Lord, it's not far off. If he was only at the level of the State Master, he wouldn't be able to react with my speed. The joint attack of Commander Yamos and I was enough to kill him. However, although he couldn't keep up with my speed during the battle, he was able to stop me from getting close to him. This caused Commander Yamos to be killed, and I was lucky enough to escape." The Winged King stared at him in a daze. He felt that this sudden amount of information was a bit too much for him to digest. In his impression, the youth who used to sit next to him in a meeting was inconspicuous. He didn't care about him at all. The only reason he looked at him was because he was curious about how he controlled Aisha, who had turned into a corpse. As for the youth himself, the Winged King didn't care. However, he didn't expect that such a small character would actually leap to become an inner wasteland master. It must be known that even a hunter family with dozens of pioneers only had one or two inner wasteland masters. It could be seen how harsh the conditions and resources needed to cultivate an inner wasteland master were. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.